So I know that Kenny won't be able to make our picture, so we're gonna, for our photo, that's all right, Kenny. So Renee wanted to see if we could maybe possibly do the first Tuesday in May, May 1st, as a possibility to do that. That would work for her, but I know Chris isn't here, but we can double check with him to see if that would work. But May 1st, and do a photo then.
Either that or we have to shop her head on your body.
Well, the other option is that taking
can use that
individuals
for
of
the
everybody
logo.
and then we Photoshop everybody.
May want him gone.
You're gonna be gone, Bob. Okay.
You guys should just.
Oh, no, wait a
Go
minute.
for it.
I'll have to check, but I'm leaving that night maybe, so I think I might be here, but I'll get back with you.
Okay, just let me know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let you know if I can't do it.
If you can't, okay.
Why don't
all
we
right.
just schedule it when we're all at a regular meeting and just do it then?
That's what he's saying.
Isn't
Yeah,
it?
that
Oh,
would be a
that's,
regular
we don't
meeting.
have to go to some studio. Or anything.
Right.
That's it.
Excuse me, I missed that part.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll let Renee know that possibility of May 1st maybe not working, but we might be able to. If not, we can maybe figure something out. Maybe Photoshop.
I
it
will
or
be able to
something.
do it.
You will.
That will work.
Okay. All right.
But we shouldn't start calling you Todd.
No. No, I am. I'm half Todd. My photo is photoshopped over Todd Murphy's body. That's why I look like, I'm 200 pounds, muscle bound, and all that. And that's what they're offering.
Well, you are 200 pounds in muscle.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
And then I woke up from my nightmare.
All right. So moving right along. Good to have you back, Councilman Huber. Couple things. We've got an executive session tonight, so as we kind of keep going, keep that in mind. But we only have 3 items really to kind of tackle. But I'm going to hand it over to you for liquor license follow.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I could, real quickly, we've put a couple things at your positions that I'd like you to be aware of. One of which is a memo from the city attorney regarding the mobile vendor permit policy. And so this should capture the changes that we understand need to be included in preparation for the second reading coming up next week. So if you want to kind of refresh your memory and check this out, this is also an opportunity to make sure that we captured everything, in that if we miss something, we need to correct that.
Only a lawyer can understand this.
I see one.
Right.
Oh,
correction?
Paragraph 1 says mobile food vendors. I think we wanted to just say mobile vendors.
I would agree. Correct.
This one does have mobile vendor on it.
Yeah,
Right here.
Oh, yeah, and this is just the explanation.
Yeah, reading
Yeah, my bad.
The other thing I wanted to be sure you were aware that you had is a spreadsheet here that is a really good historic document with regard to all the projects that 1% has funded since the dawn of 1% back in 1975. So if you have those questions out in the community or you're researching yourself, not only do you have 1% 15, but you have all the successive, or I should say the cycles leading up to 15 as well. And lastly, this book right here is a collection of all the capital projects that we had considered for 19, both funded and unfunded, pursuant to your deliberation over the capital plan and what it is that we need to talk about or ultimately approve by virtue of the budget. So
Is the police department in here?
the police department, to the extent that we have recommended thus far, the design, the site location, and that kind of groundwork, if you will, is.
Okay.
Yeah. But you also have in here projects that didn't make it to the top 2 priorities that we presented to you the other night as well. So that's what this is all about right here. And then with that, Mr. Mayor, the first item tonight, council asked that Mr. Taylor and Mr. Galloway come back in for a follow-up visit pursuant to the questions you might have or things you wanted to follow up on, given their presentation, I think it was 30 days ago or maybe a little more when they were here last. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, I defer to the council and whomever you'd like to visit with first.
Sure. Travis? Come on. Come on.
Good afternoon, I'm here, members of council, Travis Taylor, 5130 Blackmore Road, Casper, Wyoming. I'm here to update on license number 5. I am just now getting my appraisals finalized for my other properties to move forward with the new license. And it's looking like that'll wrap up this coming week, and then I can move forward with my institution as far as my borrowing for my new project and site. So that's where I am. Basically, as you probably already know, there's only like 2 commercial appraisers in town, and they're booked. So that took me a couple months to get that finished, and I should be done, like I said, in this next coming week, and then keep things moving forward.
Questions?
Just a reminder where the properties are talking
Yeah.
about.
Could you give us a little reminder of the
Mike
properties?
wasn't here for some of that.
My properties as far as Taylor Sports Bar and the Deer Creek Lounge in Glen Rock, Wyoming.
And a new one to propose.
And the new one is totally separate, of course, for license number 5. License number 5's parked right now. That's the one that I'm working on. But the other one's in Evansville, Taylor's Sports Bar, and then one's in Glen Rock, Wyoming, at 13 South 3rd Street. It's called the Deer Creek Bar and Lounge. But that's where I'm at. I'm moving as quick as the speed of lightning, and there's really not much. I mean, I'm not holding anything back, and I know the urgency to get this done. So, but I can only do so much. Put the order in, wait for them to come back with the appraisal, and move forward with the banking institution and the site plan, and then let you guys know where we're at.
Dallas and then Jesse.
I think what they want to hear, Travis, is when do you think you may be able to open up this new business with this liquor license? Don't hurt yourself here.
Right, but there is moving parts to this whole deal. So
Just give us
under
a
the
time frame.
under the timeline that I'm dealing with, I'm gonna have to move into an existing structure in order to meet that timeline. There's no way I can go and buy a piece of ground and build the building and permits within this time frame that's left. It's impossible, and I know that. So within this existing time frame, I'm looking at October, I'm hoping, but that's what I'm looking for, if not sooner. But I'm gonna have to, with this leftover timeline, unless you guys give me permissions for unlimited time moving forward, I'm gonna have to move into an existing structure. On that topic,
Well, you really have to, I think, get something done within this first year. You were allowed this transfer from one corporation to another. There's some cities that won't even do that. I had a problem for a client down in Cheyenne over this. So if you get something done within this first year, you're probably gonna be okay, but you come in here and then ask for another year, then I know a couple guys on the council that are gonna put the grill on you pretty hard.
Sure, I understand. That's what I wanted to follow up with right now is if, once everything's done and that's what I'm asking. So basically I can't go out and buy and purchase a new piece of property and build a $1 million plus building with the time frame that I have. So one of my questions to you is, say if I decide that that's ultimately what I want to do, am I going to be able to put up like a little shell temp? Am I going to have to put up a little temp opening as far as little temp building before the real building, just so I can per se be open within my time frame?
What does council think?
Well, I can tell you, this is what has happened in Cheyenne. I know of two instances. One where they were building a building and they had to rent a house across the street, and the council allowed them to sell liquor out of the house until the deal across the street's about. Now, I have a client who is actually building a building like he's talking about, but what they had to do was go in there and finish off a room in that address and order liquor from, the key is when you order liquor from the liquor commission. And so they had to do that. And then, under the law, if you purchase liquor from the liquor commission and you are open 1 day a week, you don't even have to sell anything. This is another loophole that the legislature didn't do anything about. So if you have, let's say you rent a place and you are ordering liquor, and you have somebody staffing it 1 day a week, it's lawful. Whether we probably really wouldn't like that, but it's lawful.
And that's,
So-
and I agree, Dallas, so that's what, I don't wanna have to do something like that either. We're all in agreement that we want it to be successful for the city to generate money for the city and be a viable business.
What's the total amount of time you got it parked?
Let's see, a year and, no, two. But I lost a year with my,
We know that.
yeah. So that's a big deal though, that one can't overcome.
We've got this 1 year since it got transferred, where I think legally you have that amount of time without begging for forgiveness or wanting to transfer. My only suggestion is that you do something within this time frame so the council knows you've activated that license, whatever you have to do that.
Yeah.
But if it's just sitting there,
No, it's not just sitting there. There's only so much I can do in so many different time frames. But I agree. I'm working on it daily, and a year to get anything done, especially for a new build and all that kind of stuff, is impossible. That's just the way it is. So you can't do engineering, planning, structure, designs. All of it takes time, and it's not up to me and my time frame, you know.
try to get something done in this year is what I would say to you.
So what you were saying to me is you would just open up whatever I need to.
I can't give you legal advice, I'm just telling you what some people down in Cheyenne did that was lawful. But you'll have to go to your own lawyer for legal advice.
Jesse?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So we changed that back in December, was that correct? And that allowed you, I guess, when we went to the renewal for your liquor license number 5 to be extended for a year.
Mhm.
So where I'm going with this is we've already given you that extension. It's due to expire this year. You've had the license, and I know you've had some unforeseen circumstances, which is unfortunate, but my problem with this is in the past we've had issues with people parking licenses sitting on them and not doing anything. You say that you'd like to be operational as soon as possible, and I think it's important that you are, because we do have numerous restaurant liquor license holders, bar and grill license holders that would like to have a retail liquor license for their business and to also be able to cater, because that's something that's not allowed. So I would have a real tough time to give any sort of additional transfer or renewal for your particular license number 5 going forward.
So what you're saying is even if I put it into a place and I'm building a new multi-million
If you're
dollar
operational,
facility, yeah.
Possibly, I'd like to see just some groundwork, I guess, basically to show that you are doing something, and this license is going towards a business, like you said, that's going to generate sales tax and of course tax on liquor that hopefully is distributed to cities and towns across Wyoming.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess where I'm coming from is, I do have concerns about park licenses, but within the year that we've already given you, if we see substantial progress, I look at that as the same way we look at our contracts when we see substantial progress or substantial completion, maybe not completion, but substantial progress within that year.
I concur with you, Bob, on that one. I support that. Does that make sense?
Sure.
On my side, okay.
Mayor, is there a limit for how long something can be dormant? One of these licenses can be dormant, or is that just totally up to the council's discretion?
I might be give you kind of a segue to.
No, that's okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilman. That is the question I think that you probably need a better answer for than what we have prepared for you this evening. I do think there's a limit, but I would prefer that Mr. Henley put together a memo that would indicate exactly what the limitations are that Mr. Taylor's facing, and then that way you're well informed with regard to what the statutes indicate and what again the limitations are that Mr. Taylor has to deal with.
But I think I
Charlie
can
and-
answer that.
Charlie and then Dallas.
I'm okay with substantial completion, but that means different things to different people. So I
I
think,
reworded that to substantial progress.
well, that's even vaguer. So I think we need to talk a
Contracts are
little
let.
bit about what that means, because I think, it's a timing issue, Mr. Taylor, where, you're doing this at a time when the atmosphere is really changing as far as the acceptability of park licenses, and it's unfortunate for you, but whatever accommodations we give you in these circumstances, I guarantee you, it will be brought up again when someone else is parking a license, and we're saying, no, you've got to do something with it, and they say, well, you did this for Mr. Taylor, so I want you to do it for me.
Sure, I understand.
And you understand all
Oh,
of
yeah.
that, so, for us to change this atmosphere, we've got to insist that as difficult as it is, that you either open something this year, or we're able to look at something and say, that's gonna open pretty soon.
Yeah, if we
Whatever,
got a contract signed,
is that what a contract for construction, is that what you're saying?
yeah, I'm not even gonna, just substantial progress. If you get a loan from the bank, you're gonna do this, I'd probably buy off on that.
So here's what happened.
You're gonna have to pay back my bank loan.
It
Go ahead, Dallas.
used to be you had a 2-year window and you could apply for the 3rd year. In July, the last legislature, they passed a law which took effect in July of this year, which says there is no 3 years, there's 2 years. So Mr. Taylor got a really good lawyer named Nicolason, changed the corporations, shifted this, which we approved of, we knew what he was doing, he shifted it into another corporation, and we gave him this approval. So technically, he's got this year, and he could come back at the end of the year and ask for another year. But the idea behind the legislature is that the 2 years is it on parking any license from now on. He had his, when it was 3 years, the same as my client did in Cheyenne, had it when he was 3 years, and of course some of these people don't know what the legislature's passed or not. So the cities around that have faced this have been lenient, like we're doing with Mr. Taylor, which is, okay, you're really gonna get some extra time.
But the city doesn't have
No, the city
just an
doesn't.
open field.
There's a statute
Yeah.
that applies to him right now. He would have this year, and then he could apply next year for an extension, and that's it, then it's done. But there's still a couple of loopholes that the legislature didn't close, because they weren't thinking about it.
Travis.
To Dallas's point, that happened just before the law changed, and I'm not an attorney, but I believe that puts me in a grandfather-like state status, being able to
Kinda
get
does.
my
Kinda
third
does.
year. So, but here's the deal, it's not my first rodeo, not my second, not my third. I am proven a couple different times, and I'm not parking, I have no desire to park it. It's costing me money. Every day it's parked, it's costing me money. I need to get this thing going myself and get it making money for everybody. So, and I want to do it the right way. for everybody in the city. I want the city to be proud of it. Obviously, you have to put something together really solid anymore. You know, you can't just hodgepodge anything and expect to get the business that you desire. So, you know, the city wants something nice, I want something nice, so I'm doing my best.
So you're okay right now. You're okay right now, I think.
So to Dallas's
Don't oversell
point,
it.
for these gentlemen here, I got as long as I'm getting progress, but as far as Dallas's opinion, I have to have it done by this December. Correct.
I would say that, unless I'm wrong, I mean, I think there's majority on council would like to see some progress.
Sure.
I'm not I mean, this isn't any official thumbs up or anything like that.
As far as, are you saying progress or are you saying open?
Council,
My suggestion was substantial progress.
I agree.
can people live with that?
But if you rent a little old house and you order $2,500 worth of liquor and you have it in there and you have a guy every Sunday, the council can't say anything to you because you got it running.
And you're not busy on Sundays,
No,
so
I can get
let's
a part-time
talk.
job. Sit down and play chess with you.
So obviously we want you to succeed,
Sure.
we want you to move forward, and like Charlie said, I mean, I think that there's that era of parked licenses
And
are
if
not.
that's not gonna happen for whatever reason, believe me, I will sell it to
Right.
somebody else. You know, I just will. Because like I said, it's costing me money. I'm a realist. If I can't make it happen, I gotta sell it and I'll let someone take it off my hands, so.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Just a comment. All I can say is please don't put us in the position where we have to seriously consider taking it.
Right.
None of us want to do
Right.
that.
I understand.
So the further you are, the easier you make it for us.
Right.
To say, okay,
Sure. I understand, and I appreciate all of your guys' patience in working with me, and thanks Dallas for all of your,
It's okay, Mr. Schmooze.
And,
Thanks for coming down.
any other questions, comments, concerns, complaints?
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We know this is not easy to hear this and having to get your chops busted a little bit here and there, but we appreciate you coming in and being candid with us and having a conversation.
Sure, yeah. When is the next appointment? Do we have that scheduled? Do you
The
have
next vlogging.
We'll
When I
have the
need to-
police, we'll have the police chief notified.
Okay.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you, guys.
Sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Galloway.
I don't know that I want to follow after that. City council, mayor, city manager. I guess I'll just kind of go through a little bit of a timeline again. I know I did this last time, but it kind of just helps to kind of portray what we've done and where we're going and what some of these calls are truly about. So I've kind of tried to keep a log. I will tell you, I've kept communications line open with the chief. I'm actually acting president as well of the Ventura County Liquor Dealers Association. We brought him to a meeting there. It went very, very well. I think everybody was really apprehensive about meeting with him and some of the the things we had heard that might occur. But I think the communication lines, once they opened up and we kind of got to see everybody's opinions on it, I think we are all truly on the same page. Whether it be about overconsumption or whether it be about just calling the police for when you need help. And in fact, we've come to an idea where we're looking for space. So if anybody has, this is where I'm struggling, is finding a location to do a class once a month where the police would actually teach his class that he's put together about overconsumption and IDing and things like that, where it would be open to any bartenders, servers, anybody that works in that capacity, once a month to go to and kind of fulfill this obligation. And I think I couldn't encourage it more. But anyway, I last spoke to you guys, I believe it was in February-ish. I can't remember the exact date. Between February and March 16th, we had a non-emergency call, which we did. Unfortunately, my staff did call 911 on that. but it was a false identification. We had an ID we knew was fake because we had a person in the bar that knew this person was not of age. Unfortunately, she left by the time the police did arrive because we told her it was non-emergency, and legally we don't have the right to detain her. But we did, of course, keep the ID, so that was great. We got one more off the streets, but it did also really open the eyes to many people of how amazing these fake IDs are. And I'm talking holograms. I'm talking it was that girl's name on it, her personal address. I mean, it's spooky how great these things are. So it's a different world out there now. And I'll tell you that the days of asking someone their horoscope or their sign. You know, that was always I remember back in the 90s, that's what we do to get guys off their fake. You know, because they would be someone else, so they wouldn't know what their sign was, or, you know, little gimmicks we used to use. We had another one where we actually kicked a person out that didn't have an ID, and an intoxicated individual with her sat in the entryway and wouldn't leave. Literally sat on the ground like a child. So we obviously had to call for help with that. I had one where a lady actually wasn't intoxicated. They did all the breathalyzers with that. She actually ran into our fence. It was snowy out. We think it may have had a little something to do with that, but she did try to leave the scene, but we were able to reconcile that and get what we needed from her. On March 14th, 15th, I procured the services of Mr. Tim Winehandle and also Chuck Yazdik. Chuck is a former sheriff. Tim is a former police officer here in town. Just to go a step further, because I'm really wanting to make sure that we are eradicating all these problems. So I brought these gentlemen in. We started with my security systems. We redid locations of certain cameras, all the way to putting in, we're going to add 8 more cameras that are on order right now for the outdoor area to really be ready for the summertime. In my personal office, I went from a monitor that was basically like your normal computer monitor to a 47-inch screen TV on the wall, so that I or one of my general managers can be in the office and kind of keep an eye on everything at once. We've got another guy that they're bringing in that's going to do training with my security guards, all the way from how to truly get someone out the door without physically harming them, and then also training with the staff on recognizing problems from, you know, systemic from overconsumption, but all the way to even like drug use, or if you think someone's, you know, possibly utilizing that or something like that, we want to make sure we're covering all our bases on this, and it's become a major concern to me. So I did that, and I've been still working with them currently. I will tell you, March 17th, I not only brought in my staff, I hired the services of Secure Guns, which is Larry Wilson. He does all the stuff for the event center. He's been around for many years. They're the most highly trained security guards in the county, for that matter. So I brought them in as well to do the daytime shift, and brought my own in the nighttime shift. St. Patty's Day went amazing. Very few problems. I talked to other bar owners, they had very few problems, and I'll tell you, downtown was busting. Every bar I went to, and I made sure I went to almost 6 of them, was just booming, and it was great. Everybody I talked to was having a good time. So kudos to the city and everybody else that's working down here, because that was what I've been really wanting to see with St. Patrick's Day. So that went really well. March 31st, I had my biggest concert to date, and it was by far another one that was really spooked about. And we had to kick 2 people out with no phone calls to the police. The only time we did have to call the police on that specific evening was a domestic issue we had later that evening in the parking lot with a young lady and her boyfriend. And we did bring all parties involved with police into the bar, and no charges were filed, and everything was able to be remedied at that point in time. So again, you know, I'm not sitting stagnant. I'm not just saying I did what I had to do for you last time and just letting that be what it is. I still want to work in concert with the chief and the police and do whatever we can to diminish, minimize, and eradicate all these problems. Unfortunately, it's just unrealistic to think that I can do that totally, because it's just not possible. I am the busiest bar later in the evening, and it's just a reality that's generally more problems happen. You know, they call it blood money for a reason. I am continuing to do last call at 1 a.m., which is significantly earlier than I'm required to by law. That's a steadfast rule with us. And in fact, we're even ending concerts now as close as we can to midnight. which I used to push that a lot later than that as well, because I think that gives them time to find rides, to do their thing, get their last few drinks in, and conclude their evening. We did add 2 more days of all ages, which I think also sends a message to the community. One, that we are accepting of that, and number 2, that hey, we are also a family place. This is not just a place to come terrorize at 10 p.m. on a Friday. We've got that very great reception from that. One ad I put out it reached over 5,000 people, and we got like 600 likes on it. We've seen an increase in business because of it. So now Sunday, Monday, and Tuesdays we are all ages and family friendly. Excuse me. We also added all art walks and what we call the third Thursdays. Now that we just incorporated, I'm on a committee with that with Jim McBride and some other people. So we're incorporating more of the all ages thing, kind of also let everybody know, hey, we are that place, and it's great because people do recognize it. I mean, we had over Christmas, I didn't mention this last time, over Christmas we had 38 different Christmas parties, and that included True Oil, Wyoming Machinery, and some others. So it was really well received. I guess that's about it for now. One last thing before I forget, to the city manager, this is off topic, forgive me for this. That lot, we are putting road base down early May, and then we will fully open that up for parking. And we're actually going to be working with Tom, that owns the greenery next door, and allow his customers to park there as well. So just wanted to keep you updated
Thank
on
you.
that. Yeah, because when we got that cleared, it was a little late and things already started getting a little nasty, so didn't want you to think I forgot about my obligation to that. So
I appreciate that.
yeah, I just want you guys to know that, I mean, I am in on this. I mean, my life is in this. I own other bars. I mean, I've got a track record, but that means nothing until it's all what's before you right now. And if you guys ever have recommendations of ways I can be better, please don't hesitate to call me, email me, come in and tell me what I can do better. Because I have an obligation as a community member to do the best I can. And I'm certainly willing to do that. And I'm not sitting on my hands. I'm continually educating my staff. I'm continually outsourcing these people that are experts in these fields and trying to mitigate these things. So I guess that's all I have at this
Just a couple
point.
comments or questions, Kenny?
I just didn't want you guys to feel like you can't call the police department. I mean, call them by all means for anything you need.
Right, and I appreciate that.
I think my biggest nag is over serving. I'm pretty sure that I could sit there and
Right.
get 20 drinks, and I don't know that anybody would cut me off. So, but with that being said, I'd be happy to donate space for your guys' classes at my office anytime.
How about you seat? We need a lot. We need something like a classroom at the college.
Oh,
If anybody has any
yeah,
connections
not
there. 'Cause
that
we're
big.
thinking, especially the first few,
That's all
we're
you
thinking
need.
it'll be in the hundreds, honestly. But
Yeah, get a hold of
Oh.
me. That worked out
Okay.
there, so
thank you. Yeah, I
I
appreciate
can
that.
sponsor you guys up there if we need a
And I do appreciate you talking about, because that's something we've expressed as all liquor dealers to the chief, is that we never want to end up in that void where we are afraid to call the police and we're trying to in-house everything, because that is a really big black hole that no one wants to get into. But we also don't want to be turning our security and our taking care of our patrons over to the police either. That's not their job. They've got plenty more to do, and they're already running really short on staff. Hint, hint. So give them some more staff members, by the way. Anything else?
Charlie.
Matt, have you had any problems with staff members consuming alcohol during their shifts?
Of course, but no. Since all this, no, we have really strict policies on that now. It's regulated, not once whatsoever. I haven't had to send any employee home.
Yes.
This is a little off the subject. Let him answer this question, please, Mr. Mayor. What do you think of food trucks downtown?
You don't have to answer that question, Matt.
There's no.
I'll say this. I will say this.
Or casinos?
I truly, yeah, all for it, as long as it goes to liquor license. I truly see both sides of the argument, and I honestly mean that. And that's why I've never, on social media, which I don't engage social media anyway from a personal perspective, but I've never come to council meetings with regards to anything like that. I totally get the side of the brick and mortar owner, those that are creating jobs, that are paying taxes. I've got 126 people that I have on payroll between my 4 companies. That's a lot of families we feed. But on the other side of that, why shouldn't a guy be able to throw his savings into a truck and go out and try and sling some burgers or whatever it may be? And I do like the thought when they say, you know, maybe restaurants need to step up their game. And I do think that, you know, as hot as they are now, there's still people got to just relax a little bit and understand the economy of things, because ultimately, if you want to go sit and have a meal with your family, a food truck's not the answer. You still want to go to a restaurant meal, sit and have a nice evening. There's just times that it's right for both. So I rode the fence as good as I could right there. How about that, huh?
Good job.
You should
Like a
run-
regular
you should
politician.
run for
I did okay. Maybe I should run for something, I guess.
Actually, I don't think it's a bad question at all. How would you feel if the truck was across the street from you in the parking lot?
Oof. I would have mixed feelings on that, let's say. I probably, you know, it would be, I would be a little apprehensive about it. I guess it just depends on what when it is happening. You know, if it's an R walk or something like that, where people are already walking around stuff like that, I guess I wouldn't have any problem with it. If it was there every day during lunch hour and they set up like picnic tables and stuff like that, well then, yeah, maybe it's a little different. I mean, and that's, you know, man, I really want to get out of this conversation. Because I've seen the social media where this goes, and I don't want to make anybody, because I have customers on both sides of it, and I try to, it's like talking religion around here these days. So.
Thanks, Matt, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the heads up.
And thank you guys, yeah, and seriously, you know, if
I got one more.
anything you guys have for suggestions, yes, sir.
Just really quick, I just wanted to say again, thank you for taking this a step further than what you have to do, and you really are, you know, having a positive impact in the community with you being the manager of your establishment and stuff. Like I said, I saw firsthand bar hopping. We ended up at your place, of course, and then there was one person in particular. She was cut off, so you know you saw somebody that was already pretty much drunk,
Right.
and stopped serving her. So I think that you are following through. I appreciate
That's
that.
good.
And that you're continuing to do so.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys.
And
Like I
since
said,
you are the 9th council member, I guess, right now, so how would you feel about a Hall Justice Center going in across the street?
from me,
Yeah,
how many people would be there in any given day?
quite a few, I imagine.
Then I'm all for it. Well, do you need me to bring a shovel? What's up? Yes, I'm all for it. Yeah. I mean,
Matt, I'm going to excuse you before anybody else asks you any.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute,
Oh,
sorry, Councilman
I
Hughes.
do
Judges
have one
jumping in.
comment. I want to echo what Councilman Humphrey said. You know, don't hesitate to call the cops. And I will tell you from my perspective, if I were to, and I suspect that there might be a sentiment about this, if there were to start to be an appearance that you were, in fact, as you said, kind of internalizing some of these security issues, taking care of them yourself rather than calling the cops, you know, not calling the cops because you're worried about what it's going to do to you, something, that would not sit well with me.
Right, no.
I'd be on to you real bad. You know, you can't help what your clientele does in all instances, and I very much recognize that. And so, call law enforcement when you need them. You know,
Appreciate
absolutely call them. And you know, I'm not ever going to hold that against you, but I damn sure will hold it against you if it starts looking like you didn't call them when you should have.
Right. No, and I know bars that have gone that route, and
Yeah.
it,
Yeah,
and
not
I'm sure
good.
you know exactly
Not
what I'm
good.
referring to. That
Yeah.
it did not fare well. So
Yeah.
no, I would never do that. But
Yeah.
we do want to get in
Well,
preventative.
and I didn't
stance,
think
so.
that I didn't think that you would.
No,
But
no,
just
I
wanted
appreciate.
to
No, but that's a
emphasize
concern.
that.
You always want to have. But no, yeah,
And when you talk to other operators, tell them the same thing.
I will.
Yeah.
I will definitely make sure that I pass that on as well.
Thank you,
Okay.
Matt. Appreciate
Thank
your
you
time.
guys
Thanks
very
for
much.
coming.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm gonna run my backpack. 43 years old and grumbling. Grab my lunch too. Oh, my water. Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Leisure Services Advisory Board update.
Yes, hello.
Come on up.
Honorable Mayor, council members, my name is Ted Rasmussen. I'm current, it was good to stand up actually. I'm the current chairman of the Leisure Services Advisory Board, Ted Rasmussen. Bear with me, I'm on day number 5 of recovery here, so I'm looking a little rough and I'm feeling a little rough too. But we'll make this very short and sweet. I think staff handed a maybe 4 or 5 page review that you can, I won't follow it exactly, but you can certainly be spiffing through it as I chat. What I want to do very briefly, as I said, is just kind of talk to you about what we do at a normal advisory board meeting with user groups. I'd like to first, if you do have that in front of you, look at the board members just to recognize, and we have a couple board members here. You guys want to raise your hands? There's over there. And Carolyn, as staff, helps us out tremendously taking minutes and putting things like this together, so we appreciate her support. But hopefully there's some members there that you will recognize. Currently we have a good mix of new people, which is always good to have fresh new people with new perspectives. People like me that have been there 2 or 3 years, and then some veterans that have been around for a while as well that can add a lot of insight that, on things that have happened throughout the years. I would like to note that Dr. Jamie Rupp was on our board last year. He passed away on a hiking accident in Colorado, but I would like to recognize Dr. Rupp as being a great addition to our board, and he had been probably 2 or 3 terms. A term is 3 years, and we miss him and appreciated his serving, but I did want to recognize him. During these meetings, we also have staff with us, which is very nice. So we have Carolyn with the rec center, Dan Coriel, yeah, with the facilities and parks, and then Mr. Cortez is there as well. So it's nice when the user groups come in that we have people that can help answer their questions, as well as us as a board being there. And then we have Councilman Powell, which we're blessed to have him. He's been on the board or a liaison for quite a few years. So it's great to have a person in between our board and the council as well, so that if 2 months later something comes up and he hears about it, he said, yes, we've been at the board meeting, or they were as a user group and brought forth this, and he's kind of there and understands things and can chime in on what may help Mr. Cortez if it needs to come to you guys as well. So to go over just briefly, we've got 21 user groups, and I won't go through all of them, but we've all been volunteers, and we all know when you're passionate about things and have kids in the programs, you're probably going to help out with it. And I can tell you, it's a great board to be a part of because you get to see some fantastic things going on in Casper. So what we do is we usually give out a 3-page kind of agenda for them to fill out. And they probably have last year's, which is good. They can fill it out for what's going on in the previous year that we can talk about and what they're looking at in the future. And we just go through that, and it's a good talking points for us as a board. We can challenge them on some things. We can ask them what's going on. We can see how their numbers are looking for membership. We ask for their financials, so we see a P&L, and we get to feel how financially secure they are. We make sure that they understand that the city isn't going to be able to support them very much. You know, we're in tight times right now, and they all understand that. And it's nice and reassuring to see all these user groups are relatively healthy. Some may have a few $100 in their account, some may have tens of thousands, but appropriately for their size, they seem to be healthy and are surviving and are doing well when the economy has retreated like it has. So it's been nice to go out and see that. With this little agenda, we can go through. If they have questions, they can ask staff, they can ask us. So I think it's nice to have a communication and a dialogue for these groups to handle things while there may be small issues before they become big issues. And as a person having been on the other side as well, it's nice to be able to get out and see staff and chat with them about issues you may have. I see a council member and have an outlet to what you're doing and to talk a little bit about what you're excited in. Everybody likes to explain what their kids are doing and the tournament and what they're hosting and things like that. So that's what we do with the smaller user groups. We also go through the larger groups that everybody's aware of, like Hogadon and Muni. They're listed here, Sports, Fort Casper, or the Ice Arena, Hogadon, places like that. So we have the city staff come in that manage those specific facilities, and we talk to them, and we're going through any issues that they may be having with rates or replacement of equipment and things like that. On that note, I'd like to say be very comfortable with the staff that we have in place. Jen's here from the rec center. Our staff is awesome. Everybody that you have in place for these locations are doing a great job, and we've seen them year after year and they're putting budgets together, they're managing employees, and we're asking them to do more with less. And it's an easy phrase to say, but until you are managing your own business, which they really are within the city's business, it's tough. And so they put in more hours themselves, or they have to let people go, or figure things out to be creative, to make things work. And so it's very nice to see as a citizen of Casper that we have good people that are being efficient in their positions as staff. So you could go through that and see, I guess, to finalize, really, just to keep this brief, I think the LSAB, Carolyn, we were looking last year, we've been around since the 70s. Wasn't the original charter from even the 70s, or was it the 80s?
It was a while back, and it was a combination of one from Fort Casper, like a Friends of Fort Casper group, and some others, and then it transpired in, I believe, 1993 to the Leisure Services Board.
The term, the Leisure Services Board. So I just wanted to say, you may not be familiar with what we do, but we've been around for a while, and I think it's served a great purpose. And I think for me, our purpose is to kind of have your guys' back when it comes to the parks and recreation side of it. As I said earlier, little things can become big things if they're not caught early, or if you don't have a voice to output to someone that can maybe help you. And I don't think the council necessarily needs to know about what the curling club is doing at the ice arena at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night, but you do want to know about the refrigeration system failing at the ice arena during the busiest times of the day. So hopefully we can kind of filter out a lot of the small stuff, and as the saying goes, don't sweat the small stuff, we'll kind of handle it. You guys will, through Tim and through Councilman Powell, see if there's a bigger item that's coming through, which I think is next on the agenda, an example of that, where we looked at the groups, and you guys are going to do something different with the larger user groups. But if we can kind of filter that a little bit for you, it takes it off your back. We've kind of vetted it a little bit, and then hand the bigger stuff up to you guys to obviously approve or handle or change as you feel needed. So that's all I really had. I think Tim and Tim may decide how often you'd like to see us. Once a year is probably ample, more or less, it doesn't matter to us. We're more than happy to show up, but whatever you folks decide at a later point when you'd like to see us, we'd be more than happy to show up. So that's all I really have, if you have any questions.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, number one, Ted, but number two, thank you for the work that you guys do on the Leisure Services
The board does a great job. It's a pleasure. And, you know, people that say we don't have things to do here in Casper, as we all know, they're not getting out and looking, and they're not realizing the people that are out there and trying hard. And one other note I was thinking of, you know, the subsidy part of some of these bigger facilities that we have, they don't realize that all these tournaments that we're throwing and events that people are having are bringing people into town, and they're going to the hotels and the restaurants and the shopping malls. So these facilities do bring in more money than just a ticket price. The soccer fields, football fields, hockey, all that stuff makes a big difference.
Charlie has something to say.
Yeah, I just, and thank you guys for coming. I just want, at the risk of repeating what you just said, it is gratifying to get to know all of these folks that are doing these wonderful things out in the community that you would never know about, because they're not there to toot their own horn, they're just there to provide a service, and they're passionate, as you say, about what they do. Something for council to be aware of, there used to be a line item for the Leisure Board for small, relatively small project. Maybe that was present before when you were here, Carden. We took that out for the reasons that we all know. But that used to be one of the incentives for the user groups to come, is to say, well, you know, we need this, and you know, this is breaking on us, and we need a new screen for our backstop for the baseball field or whatever. And I was kind of wondering when that went away, if the user groups would continue to come, and they have, because they do appreciate a chance to talk about what they do, and so it still has been meaningful. And so, but these folks do a great job. And the other thing I want to say is, it's kind of the rule that these user groups will come and express appreciation for our staff, for Carolyn, for Dan, and getting to know Tim, and for Jan, and they just talk about how when they need something from the city responds. And so, our staff just does a wonderful job of managing this and trying to take care of these facilities with limited resources. And, you know, we have to continue to maintain them, as difficult as it is with our budgetary situation, because things do wear out. And the Leisure Board is kind of the first point of contact many times where people can say, you know, this is something we're gonna have to address. And so, it really is, I feel very fortunate that this is one of my assignments. So, I've just met a lot of great people this way.
Any additional questions or comments for Ted? Great. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Good job. Carter requested about a 5-minute break real quick. I think Tim getting prepared, so if we can do that. So get a drink, grab something, go to the restroom. 5 minutes.
Carter, this is great. I wonder if it's interesting to do
You saw some of the issues in the paper that Galloway is having.
Be a big number.
Well,
He'd have some issues. Bad things happening. So we just asked him to come for us and
I do know, in general,
It's hard to kind of glean those from the blow-by-blow. Just almost like an
expressing displeasure with different words.
That's a great idea.
once and money over time. Here's what we've done with
You don't want to get in that
And
position.
then you put things like the David Street Station.
If you want to run that as a business, and I don't worry so
Well,
much
wait a minute,
about,
actually, those aren't the big ticket items.
about socialized big businesses. I worry more about a shoestring vertical operator. Because, you know, if you got a bunch of money tied up in something, you're gonna try to run it. So I had something that.
Mr. Cortez.
If I set the table.
Oh, yes. Mr. Napier.
Hey, that's all right. Mr. Cortez is coming.
You don't have to
momentarily, I
answer
promise.
that, Tim.
Stand behind the man right here.
Go ahead, Carter.
Thank you. The Leisure Services Advisory Board actually helped us with this particular item that we're bringing to your attention this evening. And I like this item because for years I've kind of wondered about the relationship that we have with these agencies. Because in fact what you have is, you have a situation, for example, at the rec center where it's set up like an enterprise, but it doesn't really function like an enterprise because it requires subsidies to survive and make happen. On the other hand, it's not a traditional general fund entity either, in that it does bring in a sizable amount of revenue that really should be reckoned with the operation itself. And so it's a bit of a hybrid situation that we have here. And I think it's that relationship with these entities that we have come to the conclusion that we think we need to look at this a little bit differently, and in a way that I hope will change the paradigm by which these entities function. We are talking about initiating some cost recovery goals that I think helps to more clearly define the subsidy that we will need for these entities to function, and hopefully that will be a cost recovery goal that you will feel comfortable with year over year as a continual sort of planning mechanism that we can use to put budgets together and revenue projections together and et cetera. But furthermore, I really like the shift in thought that this particular lens, if you will, that we're adjusting somewhat, causes us to view the operations through. I was thrilled to hear Mr. Cortez's description of the interdepartmental services that are being charged to the entities and their reaction. Because what they're saying is, right now, we're not going to meet our cost recovery goals if indeed we are obligated to take on these interdepartmental charges in the form that they're being presented today. And I'm worried that if we don't adjust our lens, that kind of conversation will not take place, and we will not have that cost conscientiousness taking place in a manner that helps us to focus on recovery goals as well as subsidy containment and reduction. And so to me, this is the first step, in my opinion, that brings us down the natural progression of focusing on business plans and performance indicators and whatnot, because I think when you do those kinds of steps and take that type of leap, if you will, we then are going to have a real possibility of reducing your subsidies and looking at things completely different from the way that we've done in the past. So with that, I would like to have Tim kind of walk through the entities I'm describing here, what their goals are, and what we hope you will support as we put the budget together, not only for this year, fiscal year 19, but every budget year from now on with these kinds of goals in mind.
With that, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm going to kind of go through this fairly quickly, so I just want to make sure you have plenty of time to ask questions. What I can tell you is that the staff put a lot of research in it, so I'm going to fly through the research pretty quickly. I do want to just let you know that the Leisure Services Board, we did an in-depth talk with Councilman Powell and the other members of that board to kind of go in depth, and each manager of each facility just dove into the research, talked about very fine details, which is, as the chairman just said, you know, is kind of like a sounding board, so you don't have to hear all that. So I'm not going to go through all of that with you, but any questions that you do have, feel free to hit me with them. So the first one I'm going to talk about real quick is Fort Casper Museum. We are looking at a 20% cost recovery rate. Doesn't sound real high. I'm going to tell you what, the museum business is a tough business. A lot of the things that you'll see down here as I kind of scroll down, they don't recover anything. I mean, very low. You know, these are like some of these are federal dollars, so they just throw money at these museums and it's like, hey, we don't expect to get $1 back, and they don't. So 20% actually is a fairly sizable number. I'll tell you historically, what the fort typically brings in is about 17%. Is what they're kind of looking at. So they're gonna have to up their game a little bit to hit 20. That's for sure. I'm not gonna go through all those individual things, but you can see there's some pretty big numbers in here. You know, millions of dollars gets allocated to these museums, and they don't recover much of anything, if anything at all. Any questions on the fort?
Yeah, if we're moving to another cost center, I do
Sure.
have a couple of comments about the fort. Sorry.
No,
Mayor.
you're
That's
fine.
okay.
You're good.
While you were assessing Fort Casper, and it may have been in a work session that I missed, so I apologize if you've already said it before, but do you feel that, I guess Fort Casper kind of doesn't get the attention that some of the other facilities within the city's purview get? It just seems like it kind of goes, not neglected exactly, but they're really subsidized almost by another nonprofit organization that helps out our museum. So I'm curious on your thoughts while you were, I guess, really putting Fort Casper under a microscope.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. I think that all of the entities that we see today have those user groups, if you will. Like, I think you're alluding to maybe Fort Casper, the Museum Association.
Right, yeah.
And they do a lot of work around there for sure, and they do some phenomenal stuff for that facility. We have user groups for like that for everything. So whether it's
Okay.
Friends of Hogadon for Hogadon,
All right.
whether it's the Recreation Foundation for the Rec Center and other entities, we kind of see that all over the place. So I don't think that I would say that they're neglected or lack of resources. I think that they're in a very tough business that it seems like people maybe don't really care about it until they really think about it, like what happened when it went under the microscope.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit, and if I could follow up, do you know off the top of your head if, and I haven't looked at it, for what's budgeted for the capital improvement plan, is there any dollars allocated towards for Casper to meet some of the needs that I had seen while touring their facility?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I believe that there's some roof repair stuff that's going in there
Okay.
to help the facility. I can't think of anything else. I do know that we're allocating some operating dollars for some lighting projects as well.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, Charlie had a question, or a
Just-
comment, rather.
Just very quickly, the rest of you received a letter in the mail from the chair of the Friends of Fort Casper, or whatever the group is, I forget the name. Mine was
Fort Casper
hand-delivered
Museum.
because it's a neighbor who lives 3 houses away. And it's clear to me that I think this goal and this discussion has spurred them to work even harder to find new ways to utilize the facility and to bring in some income and some revenue. And so, and I know they're gonna be working very hard on that. And so, it's a good thing. But I think without a target, it's hard to know how much of that work would happen anyway. But clearly, there's a strong commitment to say, we've got to make this, we've got to reduce the subsidy. So, and I think we'll see that in the other groups as well.
Sure. Close this guy. So next one we talk about is the rec center. We have Jennifer Haynes here who manages the rec center. So she did a lot of research here on this one as well. And what we're recommending there is a 50% cost recovery. They have historically kind of hovered around that 46 to 52%. What I can tell you that's unique about this particular facility is they're in a market that has kind of become saturated over the years in Casper, Wyoming, which is there's a lot of workout facilities and such around town now, whereas back in, when I was, looking for a place to work out, you had like 3, and now it seems like there's quite a few places. So Jen works very hard to kind of hover in that 50%, and where they're at in the market space with regard to fitness centers and such is a value play. So they're, what they require for an annual membership is kind of what you see for a month or two at a regular gym. So they're in a pretty compressed area. But you can see as I kind of scroll down here, some other places in Campbelltown, Rock Springs, they kind of hover in that same kind of area, if you will. But I think that where Jen's at with 50%, dead on for what they can do, and they're also trying to absorb costs. And there's always costs for all of these facilities that just kind of trickles up, as we all know, with just inflation, and her willingness to kind of tackle those costs and kind of keep things where we're just subsidizing it by 50%, I think is admirable. So you don't see a lot of movement right there in that particular one, which you will see in the ones that follow. Any questions on the rec center?
Nope, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah.
Kind of going back towards the capital improvement plan, and I really dived into it last year, I guess, when I actually had the book form, and I appreciate getting the book form for this meeting for fiscal year 19. There was the entryway capital plan, so I was just curious to know if that's in there, and then I know there's a lot of items in terms of replacing equipment and things like that, and I know, I don't think all of that was done, so I'm just curious as to where we stand, moving forward for this year for the rec center. How do we see, is the facility going to improve at all, or are we kind of just staying in a holding pattern for gym equipment and the entryway?
Councilman, that's a great question. So the entryway, for instance, is still in plan, but it's unfunded. So we won't see any movement there, which is unfortunate, but it's not a necessity, if you will. It's certainly something we would really like to get done in the coming years. But we do still have in the capital plan per your approval $35,000 for equipment to get replaced, which is sorely needed. It hasn't been done for probably 3 years or more, where we've seen that get some equipment replaced. The gym floor is still very usable, but we have to refinish that floor to the tune of $60,000 to give it kind of a life expectancy that can go out, 10, 20 plus years. And then I think those would be the major projects that we're looking at.
Great, thanks.
I will point to these action steps. I'm going to close this one out. I'm not going to read these, but as part of the research, each facility has identified ways through this cost recovery to bolster and get more revenue or to cut costs. We're going to get Hogan on. Bring up Hogan on here. Hogan on 60% cost recovery rate. You'll notice here there's kind of an absence of research, it looks like. It's not because we didn't try. Chris Smith up there tried very hard, but Hogan is a very unique facility in the United States. There's not a whole lot of municipally owned ski areas in the country. So there's really nothing to really draw from to say this is where we should be or not be. What I can tell you is that Chris is kind of aiming a little bit high. They typically are in the 50s for cost recovery, but he's really banking on added revenue from the new lodge and what that's drawn in as far as people, and the lights over Hogan project also ties into this a little bit. I'm not going to rehash that out either, but there was some added revenue that we were looking at for that as well. Anyways, questions on Hogan?
Just, and then Mike.
Just a quick question, I guess I should have asked it earlier, but so we have a cost recovery percentage. Do we have a dollar amount that's going to be associated? So maybe last year, $500,000 is the subsidy. Is that what we're going to expect? So, with the 50% in there, what would we expect for Hogan, for example? Is it going to be a subsidy of $560,000 at a 50% cost recovery rate, or is it going to be closer towards maybe $400,000? Do you know, with that cost
we do know what the subsidy level is now.
Yeah.
And we'll always be looking to drive down, I'm not quite sure I understand the entire question, but we're always looking to drive down the amount of the subsidy.
Well, if our revenue is kind of consistent on what we expect year over year, and if we know that cost recovery rate, you know, in order to subsidize that, I would just be interested in knowing, you know, how much we're going to have to transfer over to cover their expenses. Well, I guess if we know their expenses, sorry.
Yeah, so we'll be attacking both sides of the equation, obviously, to drive down expenses, just like you said. And then the revenue piece, trying to, what we currently come to you with is say, this is what we would like to raise revenue to help offset some costs or to just drive down the subsidy. But I think historically what we've just seen is to offset some costs.
Okay.
So I think now what the paradigm wants to be, or what we want it to be, is more of attack both sides of the equation and drive down the amount of the subsidy.
Okay.
But every year, when we prepare budget, we have a transfer in showing what that level of subsidy would be on an
Right.
annual basis.
And I guess so, Mr. Manager, you know, it might be beneficial to see that transfer in, but for future council members, especially, you know, being a junior council member and being on board, it would be nice to know, you know, there's a 50% cost recovery rate percentage, but what exactly does that equate to? You know, what's something that is a norm? So, you know, $560,000 towards, you know, this facility, or $960,000 towards the event center. You know, it'd just be nice to know, I guess, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and where we stand with the percentage.
Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I talk to that a little bit? Councilman, Hoganon's a good example of what we would consider a fairly niche market with regard to being a specific set of users and users that really can't find this type of activity nearby elsewhere. And so with regard to what we rely upon them for, we anticipate year to year putting about $330,000 into the operation to keep it rolling.
Okay.
And that is at an average rate of, would you say, about 50%, if I'm reading the memo correctly?
Yeah, it's in the 50s, high 50s.
And so I would hope that with that type of increase in terms of cost recovery, we could drive that down another 50,000 or whatever out of Hoganon.
Okay.
The question you have, though, I think is really interesting in that the data is easy for us to point to, and certainly would be something we could drop in an email to everybody, so you can at least have a point of reference with each of these entities to see what we hope to improve by and what we are currently obligated to in order to keep the operations a going concern.
Great.
But we'd be pleased to do that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Mike.
Mr. Mayor, and Tim, you already partially answered part of my question. The idea being to try to drive down or hold down costs. With Hoganon, with all the rest of these facilities, to what extent are you considering like raising rates as an effort, you know, part of that overall effort, or is that, have you gotten into it that deep, or?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, yeah, that's exactly it. Rates is a huge probably part of this, but don't get me wrong, we're not looking to fee our way or rate our way out of the hole, if you will. It would just be used in conjunction with cost containment to arrive at a goal that kind of gets us at that, what we think is a appropriate level
So you're
of
hoping
subsidy.
that costs down, increase, grow the business, and as part of that side, there might be some rate increases for all these different facilities.
Absolutely, and part of that is really empowering our facility managers to be creative on how they can raise revenue. So it may not just necessarily be like a lift ticket price, for instance. It might be like, hey, what can we do with our user groups to bring more people in the door, to get more food and beverage, if you will, at the lodge. It's all that stuff packaged up to drive up that amount of revenue that's being recovered.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
Charlie and then Dennis.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just to add to that, just so everyone's clear, part of the problem that the facilities have had is that changing rates for any of these services has been a very cumbersome and detailed process that has always involved us. And so you can't change how much you charge for a towel at the rec center without the council approving that change. And so part of what I think we're trying to do with this is to remove some of those burdens and let these managers really act like managers, because they know how much it costs for a lift ticket at Terry Peak or Snowy Range. And they are in a position to make decisions about what things should cost, and let them manage these facilities with a target so that they can cut costs however they think is best, but also raise revenue in as many ways as they can, and let them really be responsible for the financial health of the facility, whereas in years past the council would just pick up the difference, whatever it was.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a concern, but I would like to ask the manager a question. How much was our total subsidy of Hogadon last year?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I want to say, rounding a little, in the neighborhood of $330,000.
Where did I get the idea that it was 500? Am I misinformed on that?
That might be more consistent with the rec center subsidy than it is Hogadon.
So, I know we talked about a $500,000 subsidy this time last year when I first came on the council, but the thing that I'm concerned about, and I haven't heard any mention of Spectra and their involvement here. But with respect to the event center, they're, what is it, 400,000 over what they should be, with bad management, bad bookkeeping. I don't even know yet what the deal is there, but I'm really worried about it. So now we have them up here running this. So I don't know how the numbers are from during this ski season, which is what we extended a little bit, and it's about ready to end. So, do you know what the numbers are and whether they're on track with the same sort of subsidy we had last year? Because when I looked at this one time, I thought that if there isn't some really hard-nosed work here, we may be subsidizing Hogadon for $750,000. And I know nobody wants that. So I'm saying it now because I'm hearing things about the food service and the drink service up there that's anything but happy. And I don't know if the junior councilman can elaborate on that or not.
Mr. Mayor, I can kind of talk about that a little bit, because I do have a pretty fair background in the ski industry and everything, and I can tell you that the thing is, especially about small ski areas, that you have to keep in mind, where small ski areas have a potential of making a profit is on the food and beverage side and on the ski rental and ski school side. And if you set up a business model where you farm those opportunities out, you're just about assuring that you're going to be in a losing proposition. And I'm not in any manner condemning Bruce Lamberson or anything else, but those are your opportunities to make money. It's just like at the movie theater. The movie theater doesn't make money putting the movie on the screen. They make money selling you a $5 box of popcorn or something. Same thing at especially small ski areas. You know, you turn the chair just so that you can get people up there and sell them an $8 hamburger and, you know, and that kind of thing. I think that's something that the city really has not paid attention to in the past. With reference to the quality of food up there, it's, in my opinion, been amazingly poor this year. You know, and that's kind of funny, because like I talked to people that went to their to Spectrum's end of the year party up there last Friday night, and they said that the food was, I mean, they just raved about it and said it was just wonderful, that it was really, really good. Well, I'm concerned because if your average person goes up there skiing during the year and gets a crappy lunch, they're not gonna bring their wedding reception, anniversary reception, family reunion, or anything else up there, you know, any other time, because they're gonna have a memory of a cold stale hamburger, you know, there. But those, you know, that's getting down into the weeds and details on some things like that.
Let me interject something here, Mr. Manager. The loss was 438,000 last year. So that's closer to the 500 I was thinking. So this is what he's gone. I show. This is Jesse's computer. So if we're misinterpreting that, let me know.
Sure.
That's the only proposed for fiscal year 18 budget, but the actual for fiscal year 16 is still right around that 430,000.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
It's a
some
big
of the,
one. It's a
so-
big subdivision.
So some of the numbers that I kind of was toying around with from all of this, I'm not as well prepared as Jesse right now, but I'm predicting it's gonna hit 750. And I don't know what we need to be doing with this company. I'm just hoping we're doing all the right things to audit what happened up there. Cause I need to know for my own sanity about this extra. The $900,000 loss is mind-boggling to me anyway, as a business person. Now a $1.3 million loss is painful for me to think about. Especially when I'm gonna make a proposal that we hire 10 more police officers. Because that's gonna be around 800,000 to $1 million. Where do we find that money if we're losing money in these other areas that could pay for that? So, I know my mind's a little strange, but I really wanna protect our children in this town from being shot or hurt or blown up in a school. And we've gotta find the $1 million a year, because it was really apparent to me last night at the school board meeting when Dabney says we have 2 officers attending to 12,000 students. So when I think about Hogadon and I think about all of our other subsidies that we're doing, and then I'm trying to prioritize that in my mind with this potential problem with the schools, I'm having a hard time sleeping. And I'm worried about how they're running our business up there at the event center, and then what's happening from what I'm hearing about Hogadon. Not making any accusations, I just wanna know the numbers specifically as to how they crunched 400 more grand out of us last year. And what is the current status of what they're doing up at Hogadon? Especially after talking to Councilman Huber about some of these other issues that I wasn't aware of, but had heard about in the community.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
You may, yeah.
Councilman, you will get a list of all the numbers that I committed to this evening as it relates to subsidies and so forth. And so we will have that to you. And it may be that number that Councilman Morgan pointed out, or it may be another number. I'm not committing either way right now. But what I can tell you is this is the first I've heard of a complaint about food service at Hogadon. And so I just simply haven't been aware of that. The other side of it is I'm not aware of similar complaints up at the event center with regard to food quality and that kind of thing. And so that does seem inconsistent to me, but it gives me something to look at and evaluate with Mr. Cortez's help here. The whole objective with regard to all of these entities is to look at this from a very holistic approach so that we can put downward pressure on subsidies. You'll recall not too long ago we had a proposal to put downward pressure on the subsidy to Fort Casper, and that didn't fly. So we need that support to keep that downward pressure applied so that your wish of subsidies going away eventually, which is all of our wishes, can happen. But it's gonna happen at little incremental steps at a time, where we take 100,000 perhaps in recovered expenses, or we see 10,000 more in revenue somewhere. But I'm worried that if we don't take a very holistic approach to dealing with the 900,000 at the event center or the 300,000 at Fort Casper, in a very methodical, broad way, we're never going to get there. And where we have a struggle closing a facility at a seasonal basis where people are not coming, versus some of the other larger things we've got to talk about, I'm worried that the support will be tenuous. And I don't think we'll ever be able to get to where you're hoping we can be.
Well, I agree with everything you said. The one factor that we didn't discuss, Fort Casper's pretty sacred ground, so you were in tough shape there, Mr. Manager, and it's nothing against you at all.
Oh, I appreciate
But when you
that.
hit the sacred ground,
And
just
see,
the way it is.
that's my concern, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. If we line up too many sacred cows, we're not going to be able to make burger.
well, that's
And
probably
that
the
bothers me.
sacred. That's probably the sacred one. I don't think the event center is. I don't. I love what's happened to Hogadon, but I don't want to see us paying $750,000 to subsidize it any more than I want to see $1.4 million up there, when I know how many police officers we should have to cover what we need to cover here with some of the things that are going on in this day and age. So I think also the other thing that I would want to look at is these one-time payments that we make, like 600,000 in chairs and whatever, and what kind of money, if we didn't do these one-time expenditures, how much money would we have left?
Okay, I feel like we're getting into the weeds here. I want Tim to finish his presentation, and so if we can continue to do that, I'd like to.
Not weeds, Mr. Mayor, bank accounts.
Go ahead, Tim.
Anything else on Hogan on before I move on there? Talk about golf here. This is just kind of pick up the mood a little bit and make money at the golf course.
Could we turn up the lights a little bit?
Turn up the
The
light.
lights?
Sure. Oh, yeah, you betcha.
So, we're recommending 110% cost recovery. So like I said, the golf course does, I don't want to say turn a profit, but that's in fact kind of what they do. The revenues exceed what is expended. They kind of hover, as you can see, around 103%. Jason, who manages this facility, he sees some chances for some additional revenue through additional marketing and reaching out and kind of playing nice with some of the other golf courses in town, setting up some other venues that we traditionally have not chased. And I think that this exercise of doing this cost recovery is that's what's brought some of these ideas out, as the creative juices kind of get going on how we can raise a little bit more revenue. People have really got outside the box and what we've done traditionally, and really look for some ways to get some additional money. But you can see as I kind of scroll down here, we do well compared to other municipal golf courses around the area. We are fortunate we have a 27-hole golf course. And then our intent here is that with the golf course making some money, we set a strong policy with regard to what's held in reserve. So that means that the one-time capital expenses that do come up, that we can handle those and still have enough in our reserve, which right now that reserve sits around just shy of $300,000, that we can help out the general fund. So give back and kind of bolster that up a little bit, which we all know that we could sort of use. So I'll take any questions you have for the golf course.
And then Bob.
Is Three Crowns in a different department or category than a municipal golf course? And that's because of the amicable reuse stuff? but as far as, any, subsidy or money coming from the city, does any money go to that?
I can address that. Yeah, Three Crowns is part of the Amico East Joint Powers Board, which is a separate governmental entity. And their funding basically came from funds from the refinery when they shut down. And quite honestly, we lose a little more money than we'd like to on that too. But right now, we're in the process of evaluating that very thing. The one thing that's hugely different about Three Crowns and the city is Three Crowns basically has to recover their own costs, and there's no real capital.
So
that-
they're not a city budget item?
No, they're not.
Yeah, okay, that's all I
But this-
wanted to know.
Our organizations here do not have a capital recovery factor either, which I think is very encouraging with the golf course, covering essentially 100% of their operating budget, so.
The restaurant management. So, I had all this information come to me, and I've talked to the manager about it. I'm good with his explanation. But an eyeball really has to watch that because of what is out there publicly about this issue. And so what I'm wondering is what the restaurant did last year, Mr. Mayor.
Still want to be
you know?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, what the business activity for the restaurant was last year? Is that the question?
Yes.
Tim, do you have any insight into that?
I just, all I can say, I don't have any hard figures for it, but from what I have gathered is it operated at a loss under the old management, which kind of just bailed on the middle of the season because they were losing money. And then what the extent of was, I don't know.
So is it open now under the new management?
It is.
But it's just been open this month?
Very brief time so far.
So Tom's got a real good eye on this.
You betcha.
He's
Yeah.
smiling over there.
Tom and Tim. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple items. First of all, Tim, I really appreciate you and your staff putting this together. I look at this as a management tool. It's the first time we've actually ever set down goals on a cost recovery factor. And from these kind of goals and what we're going to be working on a resolution here shortly, I strongly encourage this. It leads to, I guess, the second half of what your cost recovery is. It leads to a variance report. And I anticipate that our manager would be asking for a variance report and why it happened. And I guess another thing, one that doesn't show up in your belly look, I don't think, Tim, but it'd be interesting to look at an analogous number for what we do in parks. And I know the number is going to be itsy bitsy when it comes to parks. But when we look at all the costs that we have in parks, our recovery factor is, I'd be really surprised if it's over 2%. And we have a lot of people that use parks, essentially everybody in town. But it might be interesting to look at, even though it's not apples to apples. With that, thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions on the golf course, we'll move off that one. We just have a couple more to go here. So this is aquatics. This is another niche market that we kind of have the corner on in the city of Casper, which is nice. Here we're recommending a 58% cost recovery rate. I'm gonna scroll down to some of the historical stuff here. So took a look at some of the other places that might have a little bit higher cost recovery, but Blaze, who's the manager of this facility, has taken some time and kind of, we just didn't really have apples to apples, but we had some variances in the different operations, so he took those into account. But for us, operating at 58% would be pretty strong. And I'll tell you where we're kind of suffering here is the chemical costs. Chemical costs are just one of those things that just kind of tends to go up year after year after year. And so Blaze will be wrestling with that as he tries to recover 58%. Is what he's looking for. But you can see some of the other places around the region. Some are definitely higher, like Laramie and Cody, and some are lower, just like you see here in Evanston. I think there might be. No, it's just there. And then once again, you know, Blaze has taken some. He's got some action steps in there to once again recover a little bit more to drive down that subsidy. Any specific questions about the aquatics, pools, outdoor? This covers outdoor
One
pools.
quick
This covers the aquatic center, which is attached to the rec center.
Go ahead, Bob.
I know we've got a real problem with the Freon on that. Is that a significant portion of our chemical costs?
I don't.
It's
Yeah,
not?
I don't believe
Okay.
so.
I know Freon is,
At the ice arena it is,
okay,
but not at this facility.
okay, thank you.
We can talk about that guy next.
Tim, do you mind scrolling up to the top part of this memo? This number is aided quite a bit with regard to what it is that the community has decided to do in response to the needs here. We 1% contributes about $300,000 a year to subsidize the rates that our community that our participants, our users, if you will, receive when they in the form of reduced rates that they pay to get into the pool. And so one of the questions that would need to be answered year after year, or cycle after cycle I should say, is whether or not that program should be maintained and continued and everything else. My opinion is that I think it's probably a pretty popular program with regard to what 1% does there, and so I would suggest that you at least think about it as we come into the part of the cycle wherein you will be authorizing basically how 1% dollars are used moving forward for the next 4 years anyway, if we are fortunate enough to see 1% 16 pass. And so I wanted to make you aware of that. As you can see on the memo here, that brings it up to about a 90% recovery rate for this particular function of our recreational effort.
Charlie and then Jesse.
Tim, would it be fair to say that the other communities are operating a single facility and that our recovery rate is going to be lower because we're trying to increase access by running multiple facilities?
That would be very fair to say, especially with regard to outdoor pools.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jess.
Thank you, Mayor. Is the splash pad in North Casper, do we have funding for that? For fiscal year 19? Great.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that should be happening this fiscal year 18, even though the construction will likely bleed into fiscal year 19.
Great. And then if I can follow up, thank you for talking about the 1 cent and subsidies in there. I had mentioned at previous meetings, you know, the pools are all subsidized. We already know some of the troubled neighborhoods that are in our community. You can definitely look at housing prices or even census data for that matter. And it discourages me, or I think it's unfortunate, that North Casper has a limited amount of kids going towards that facility. And I think that might be in large part because they simply can't afford it. And I think that's too bad. We have parks for them. So I think it would make more sense to either apply additional subsidy for that particular pool or move the subsidy that we already contribute from some of the more fortunate areas towards there, just to see if that does increase. So essentially making pools free, and then I'm trying to see if I can make it on my own, just to try it, I guess. So for a week, you know, up to X amount of kids free with me and a few other partners and businesses, just to see if that would increase the usership in that particular neighborhood. But I guess as we get to number 16, 1 cent, maybe that's something that you could consider, because we know the kids are in the neighborhood. There's no denying that. Why aren't they going? And I think a cost component could be associated with that.
Any other questions for that?
The last one we're going to talk about this evening is the ice arena. So Blue McGrath is our manager of this facility. He's looking at 65% cost recovery rate, and you can see historically we have around 60%. Once again, just through some cost containment, and then getting more programming in and getting more people involved in the ice arena. look on, and also raising ice time, you know, rates on ice time will go up a little bit. And he's looking at over the next couple of years hitting 65%. You can see down here, that puts him kind of in the region of what we see in other areas like Gillette. Gillette and Laramie. And then also he kind of broke down what it is, the kind of the ice rate. You can see we're kind of priced pretty low on that, so I think regardless if we're looking at, we'll be seeing some increases in ice time.
I apologize, this was the Freon issue. I had them in a different order on the computer.
There you go. So anyways, this, just Councilman just mentioned previously is, we do have problems with the ice plant. It's been kind of held together with bubble gum. But we do have in this fiscal year to get that replaced, we needed a little additional money to get that done, which is in the capital plan. And hopefully a new plant will alleviate some of those costs that we're seeing from the Freon issue. Any questions for the ice rate?
Yes.
How long has the user group rate been 125 an hour?
I'd probably defer to Carolyn, possibly a couple years. I know it's been slowly going up, but yeah, it is low for the region.
It is, Mayor Council, we typically raise those every 2 years, and they've been in a little bit of a holding pattern, based on some direction we had received, until so this could be put in place and address that likewise, but, it has been, typically we raise it $5, $10, or $15, depending on, but it's a 2 years, it had been on a 2-year cycle.
Thank you. What's the proposed raise with this? What will it be per hour?
We haven't really talked about it, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we haven't really talked about it. I think that there's some other factors at play, but I think once again, it really, because of those other factors, I think it really lends itself to this discussion about cost recovery, which is being nimble and being able to react to different forces that go on a daily basis.
But what would
And
you
I'm not,
expect?
I'm gonna probably say that we're gonna probably from what I've talked with the manager, he's talking about stepping up for where we probably see that 150 in the period of 2 years.
So is it gonna go up this year?
I would anticipate so, yeah. It was due to be scheduled to be coming up anyhow, but we postponed this so that we could bring in this product.
So what do you think is gonna go up this year?
I'll probably say in the 135 area.
And then when are we gonna start on the redemption of the ice equipment, so we're not having breakdowns?
I think as soon as we get the capital plan finalized, we'll have the funds to go out to bid and start the process.
And that'll approximately be when, Mr. Manager, would you say?
Mr. Mayor, we deliver your budget in the middle of May, Councilman, and with your, sort of tacit approval, we could get the groundwork done so that on July 1 we can start work as quickly as possible at that point.
How long do you think it'll take to get it done?
How long are we anticipating for the ice plant replacement, Carolyn? Do you remember?
Yeah, it would take about 3 months. They were talking about taking it down in April, and so it actually would be not even this, but April, and then to get back up and running in September.
Okay.
So we haven't taken it down yet, and it's April.
We have not.
So we're pushing it into October then, but if we go to July, it'll be later.
It would be next. It would go out to bid.
Because the season starts in September, for ice hockey. Would there be a chance we're gonna have it done for that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, it doesn't sound like that would be the case. The difficulty that we ran into was with regard to having the complete package of funding available in this fiscal year. Hence the reason you see a partial plan for funding in 19, which essentially rounds up all the money we would need to get the plan completely.
Speed it up at all?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I think we probably can speed it up, but it would. It would be a cash flow issue. I mean, that's true, and so if council is comfortable that they feel like that is a given and we're ready to roll, then.
Well, if we have the money, if we're gonna get the money, I really would, I hate to see these kids miss a season, because if they're seniors in high school, they miss the whole season.
Sure, yeah.
And, you know, I coached hockey for 15 years, and boy, to have missed the season would have been devastating for kids, because that's their only sport, and it's a 6-month sport.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, please understand, we don't anticipate any seasons being lost, even if we do have to put a replacement schedule out toward October or April or whatever. The timing is really critical for this, in that if we don't get started early in the form of taking the plant down and out and everything else, we do push our schedule forward to the point that we might compromise the season. So timing is really critical, and I think staff would tell you now, waiting until April of next year is probably the ideal. And so, but we don't anticipate losing seasons at this point.
I'm nervous for some reason.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a serious concern that the system will have a catastrophic failure between now and April?
Mr. Mayor, we don't have a crystal ball. I've asked that same question because I think I'm just like Councilman Laird, you know, and Lou and his folks. It's, you know, it's on its last leg, but
It's working.
it's working, and we, just like the manager said, we have no anticipation of losing the season, which is why timing is critical. That is exactly our goal in the end. Now, could it have a catastrophic failure as I'm sitting here talking to you right now? Absolutely, you know. But it could also happen with the new plant as well, so.
So there is another issue that we haven't ever discussed, but Lowell bought ice equipment for the event center, which is in storage. So I don't know what it would take if this thing fails to get that ice equipment up and running where these kids could play hockey. Because truly, Mr. Manager, this would be devastating if this thing shuts down.
Oh, it would.
Shut down from September through whatever.
Right.
It would, for kids, because they can't come back. They can't come back and redo it when they're at a certain age level.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we have looked extensively at the idea of relocating the plant from the event center to the rec center in order to ostensibly save costs and so forth with regard to the total replacement of the ice plant at the rec center. And believe it or not, it doesn't make a lot of financial sense given the fact that we don't anticipate building another oval for a number of years from now. On the other hand, if indeed that was within our plan, I think we would gain some economy of scale by taking on the cost of relocating the plant and all the appurtenances and the building necessary and everything else to relocate it to the event center in conjunction with the expansion of ice availability here in our community. But beyond that, I know it's hard to believe, but it doesn't make financial sense.
And the systems are mechanically pretty different.
They are different.
Significantly different.
Still have to tear up all the pipes.
Right.
Any other comments or questions? Thanks, Tim.
So in closing, I'll just tell you that with the package that I just delivered to you, you're looking about, if all goals were realized, you'd be looking about 120,000 taking off the table. So I don't have a breakdown, maybe is what you're alluding to, Councilman Morgan, but that's what we're looking at right now as things stand today.
I think Councilman Morgan had one more thing.
Yeah, just one question, now that you're wrapping up. You know, last year, when the Leisure Services Board approached the council, you know, they gave us numbers in terms of enrollment, how many people have gotten passes. Let's give an example of Muni and rates and things like that. So I'm just curious as to that component. Do we see rates going up for, you know, lift passes or going down? Would reducing, you know, your green fees for the year, your membership for the municipal golf course, would that help? I know there's been some concerns just in dealing with certain individual at the golf course, but would reducing rates get people there? And I guess what is the Leisure Services Board recommending, or what do you recommend?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I think that's a great question. I think that lends itself to discussion because, like I said earlier, we're not going to fee our way out of anything. So there might be instances where lowering fees might make sense, but I think that to have the latitude to do that, which is what we're asking for tonight, is ultimately what we're asking. And I think then we move on to that discussion of what does the model look like? If we reduce the rates, can we bring in X number, meaning in the volume, can we bring up volume to where we actually do better?
Yeah.
Or are we in a niche market where it makes sense that we don't have to reduce because you're not going to go anywhere else to get that product? In creating that pay-to-play type system where we're reducing, ultimately the goal would be to reduce the subsidy, whether we're lowering rates or raising rates, that's the goal. So I would rely on my subject matters, which would be a Jennifer Haynes, saying, hey, if we did this to your rates, let's say we raised them, well, shoot, we're not going to be a value proposition anymore within the market space. I would not want to do that.
Right.
The answer to your question would be is we're going to keep things flat and figure out other ways to raise revenue or increase expenditures.
Thank you. I guess the reason that I asked that, I asked last year with our previous city manager, are we going to be in the position that we can actually talk about rates for some of these areas? In 2016, there was a particular kid that approached previous council, and he was concerned about the lift ticket price for Hoganum. And so, I kind of reevaluated that and brought that up again. City manager said, yeah, we'll talk about it. And then we had management changes, and then we never had the opportunity to discuss it for fiscal year 18. So I'm just curious to know, will we be giving any direction or hearing direction for fiscal year 19?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I really think that's the next step. And I think that that's exactly why we need this direction this evening, so that we can get a feel for what the target is that you'd like us to shoot for. And that gives us a lot of direction with regard to where we think we might have opportunity in raising revenue that might not include raising a rate to get that revenue. So we've got some more homework to do, and I would like to bring those kinds of questions forward in more of a business plan environment, so that you have a broader view of what we're trying to deal with and focus on, a piece of which may include a request for a rate increase, if you will.
Okay, thank you. I just want to know what to expect
Sure.
moving forward in this fiscal year budget.
Charlie, then Dallas.
Just having sat on the leisure board as this process unfolded, I just want to speak very strongly in favor of this proposal, because the managers of the facilities have come to us, and you can sense their excitement over the prospect of having a little more control over the facilities that they run, and more say-so in terms of how things are structured, what fees are set, and have them, the people who are truly knowledgeable about the service that they provide, assess things, and you use the word nimble, you also use the word empower. I think those things come together, and so that we can say to our managers, make it work. Here's your target. Figure it out and do the things you need to do, and essentially delegate those day-to-day responsibilities to the people who know how to run these facilities. And so, yes, I want to be informed about the decisions that they've made, but I don't want to micromanage them. And let's give them a chance to prove that they can hit these targets, because if they do, we do make a small incremental cut in this overall subsidy of $120,000. Well, that's not nothing. We want more, but this is the start. And so I think this is a very serious change that we're contemplating, where we are essentially stepping back and saying, this is yours now, and prove to us that you can make this work. They're passionate about serving their clientele. They're not going to want to price themselves out of the market. That's the last thing they want to do. They want to make wise decisions where they are getting an appropriate revenue stream without running people out of the facility. So, and I just have great confidence. If you could hear the excitement that they had over this whole proposal, it was very encouraging. So I say let's give them a shot at it.
Dallas.
I agree with Charlie. I don't know about, I hate seeing things go for 4 years at a time. I'd like to see us look at it each year. That is one thought I have about it. I'd also like to, I agree with Jesse, I'd like to see the North Casper pool free for a summer, see what happens. I don't know what that costs us, but I'd like to see that. Secondly, or thirdly, and lastly, is Mr. Manager, I'm unsure about the status of the ice rink. Do we have the money to get this thing taken care of by September? And if we had to use money that is in our savings account, will we have the money to pay the savings account back? Is that something you could put together for this council to look at? Because I don't like the idea of leaving this another month or two down the line before it's given any consideration. But if we're gonna have the money to be able to do this, but we don't have all of it right now, can we borrow from our savings account and then pay it back and be good and have this thing done?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, in an ideal situation, if we were able to pull the trigger on replacing an ice plant tomorrow and start that process and all that kind of thing, cash flowing the cost of the project would not be the issue. The issue would be having the time adequate to do everything and get a project of that magnitude and that type of sophistication complete. And so what I'd feel better about is bringing a memo back to this council to talk about what we think we can do, even if council is ready to give us the green light and pull the lever to allow the money to happen, and what that would mean. Because as I sit here now, I haven't really given staff that challenge to put that together, and I feel like we wouldn't be giving as good an answer in that regard.
Fair enough. But
Okay.
when could you do that? When could you give us an answer? How soon, without, I know it's budget time, but how soon could you give us an answer?
Oh, I'd like to give you an answer Tuesday of next
That would
week
be great.
as to how that could look.
Okay.
Now, I can't guarantee that it'll be the ideal answer that you're looking for, but I certainly can give you a feel for what it would take.
I just want our citizens to know what's happening and what we can be doing about it, because I don't have kids in it this year, but it'd be devastating to have that closed down.
Oh, it sure would.
Bob and then Mike.
Yeah, I agree with Charlie. This is an excellent prelude to the budgets we're gonna be working on. And I think it's important that we take these kind of steps. And I also think, I'm not sure, but as I recall, this will be the first time since I've been on council that we've ever addressed or started to address the rates before we went into the budget. Typically, I think our department heads put the budget together, and then we'd have to come through midterm and say we need to do something with rates. So I think this is a first for us. So I really think we're headed the right direction.
Thank you.
Mike.
Mr. Mayor, I support this idea of setting those goals. I think that's a great thing. Tim, I'm not as troubled by the city investing money, and I view these, it's a subsidy, yes, but, I like to think that the city is investing money in these facilities. But I don't want it to be like we're just throwing money into a hole with any of them. And what I really would like to see is, all of these facilities on a business plan that's a realistic business plan. Not just a plan that it's forever not going to be realistic. And realistic doesn't mean that it's ultimately ever going to become profit making, but realistic is just that. And because I view these things as investments, and I want them to be good investments, not bad investments.
All right, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I know why the fire department always gets all this money.
Thank you.
We're taking it to the police department now.
Thanks, Tim.
Agenda review, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you will turn to your grid document, which looks like this. You should have a hard copy in front of you there. We are getting through our touch point conversations we need to have that help us put budgets together. And so I appreciate the labor that takes from this group and everything else. We've got a few more to go. And you will notice that on your meeting of April 24th, which is one that will be very interesting to many of you and will give us a lot of good direction, particularly if things change. One of the things that I want to bring to your attention, however, so you don't think we're doing a redundant sort of discussion with you, and that is with regard, again, referring back to April 24, the financial plan, cost of service, and rate design for water and sewer. We are not giving you the same presentation that we gave you a couple weeks ago on rates for utilities. This is a far more complex discussion about the philosophy that council should consider pertaining to the larger, broader rate design assumptions that we've made over the years. This discussion will challenge that paradigm, again, that you've been operating under for a long, long time. And so while even if you were to say, yep, we want a brand new design for things, I would tell you that it would not affect the direction that you gave us the other day pursuant to a more year-to-year or budget-to-budget discussion about rates and what rates should look like, and et cetera. So please keep that in mind. I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll be a good discussion. As far as some other things are concerned, I talked to you about budget delivery a few moments ago, and that is captured in the May 21st meeting and May 22nd meeting. That's when you will have, and May 23rd if we need it. That's when you will have the budget given to you, and we'll go through the information in the manner that you described in retreat. And if we need more than one night, we have 3 available for us should we need it that week. And then after that, the formal approval for the budget comes on June 19th, which is on the back of your grid document. And then as a reminder, for any items that you're kind of wondering where they're at, and they may not be docketed in the dates that you have on your grid, if you look on the very back at the very bottom, you have a section called Upcoming Work Session Agenda Items. Those are items that have had previous expression of interest, but we just haven't gotten docketed yet. Okay?
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Charlie, anything on the legislative front?
Well, yes. Yes. I attended the Region 4 meeting last week in Riverton. And just to remind you all, Region 4, we are the easternmost edge of Region 4. It includes Riverton, Lander, Pavilion, Shoshone. And it was very well attended. The staff came up from Cheyenne, and we had about 20 people there. I was again asked to serve as the Region 4 representative on the board of directors, but I talked someone else into being the legislative leadership committee representative for Region 4. But we went through the post-session summary report that our WAM staff put together, and it's quite detailed because a lot happened. But I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can. As you all know, we were successful at the direct distribution allocation, which went through without any arguments, amendments, friction of any kind. And I think WAM played a very significant role in that, really did all the heavy lifting as far as explaining the importance of that direct distribution allocation. Pretty much everything else that we were advocating for was unsuccessful because of the atmosphere in the legislature. We were really trying to encourage the legislature to look at our tax structure and step back and say, is this really working long-term for us? And there just was not an atmosphere to seriously consider any structural changes, partially because our economic outlook was somewhat better at the time that the legislators met. Just trying to go through this, because again, there's a lot of detail. There were 300 130 bills introduced, and WHAM monitored 188 of them. So there was a lot of work to be done to track all of these things, because they can change in a heartbeat and all of a sudden have a very significant impact on us and all of the other municipalities. So the things of note, WHAM goes into a session having passed a series of resolutions, and that will happen again for the upcoming session. And we all have influence in terms of what those resolutions look like, and we can introduce them. We, for example, took the lead in pushing for some stormwater utility changes, so that to make it more possible for municipalities to actually create a utility.
And
that-
liquor laws.
And liquor laws, and so we have had some significant impact on those things. I'm not gonna go through all of the resolutions that WHAM went into the session proposing. We had some successes and some failures. As you all know, the airport funding bill is moved forward, and WHAM was in support of that. And you've heard me talk ad nauseum about the extraterritorial jurisdiction issue, and we essentially lost that battle, and so we have very little influence now from this point forward on what happens at our boundaries. And so, but there is still some discussion that will happen from this point forward. If I can just, in case it comes up, the end result was that House Bill 14 passed, and it says that any development within 1 mile of the city's limit must meet 5 conditions. And those conditions include things like it must be consistent with the land use plan that the county itself has approved, and others, such as utility easements that would continue from the city's boundary through into the county land, so that if it's annexed, you still have a way to get power and sewer and water to those developments. But the language that was so problematic for WHAM was the county developments have to meet those 5 conditions as long as it's practical, whatever that means. So I think you've heard me talk about that. So that's what passed. And so we just had to shrug our shoulders and say, that's how it came out, and hopefully we'll have a positive atmosphere, and those 5 conditions will be met every time there is a development. The water development bills for local infrastructure all passed, and so there is money available for water projects in the upcoming budget, as there has been in the past. There's a complex bill that I really don't want to talk about in detail, but it's going to come back, and it's the Community Development Districts bill. And this was really a Cheyenne initiative that would essentially create a community within the city's boundaries that would have its own fee-setting authority and its own responsibility to provide certain services. And so there was a lot of give and take about whether this was a good thing for the cities or a bad thing for the cities. And this was Senator Nethercott's proposal, and it failed on the 3rd reading in the House. But it will come back, and it's something we're going to have to understand and comment on to see how it would really impact us in the future. Because essentially you're ceding control of a portion of the city to essentially what would you call it?
Almost like a special district.
Yeah, and yet you're also removing some of the responsibilities you would normally have for providing services to that area. And so we're just going to have to study this, because it will come forward again. Let's see, what else happened here that was of interest to us?
Was that Cynthia's, utopia she's creating in Cheyenne? So
Yes.
is that shot down completely? Just curious to know.
Well,
Or are
the
they
bill
moving forward with
bill
that?
didn't pass.
Okay.
So it had to pass for them to be able to move forward with
Oh,
that.
okay.
Interesting. Did it even get out of committee, did it?
It failed on 3rd reading, so it got pretty close.
After getting through the Senate, it went
Yeah.
all the way through the Senate and
Yeah.
failed the House.
And I think it was one of these things where people just said, I need to know more about this, and we don't have time. But it's coming back. The election law changes all were passed, and so those of you running for office this fall have a whole new set of reporting requirements that the clerk will inform you about. Apparently there have been some people that have sort of just not paid attention to those things and gotten away with it. Let's see, Wyoming retirement plan, fee increases were approved. And what else? There was a food truck bill in the legislature, I don't know if you all remember that. And basically it said that if you own a food truck and Shoshone says that your food truck meets their municipal standards, you can drive to Casper and run a food truck, and Casper can have nothing to say about that because you've got your Shoshone certificate. So, and it's interesting philosophically, and again, I think we should be paying attention to these things, because, yeah, we shake our heads and say, what's that all about? Because people talk about local control, but when they get down to Cheyenne, they seem to think, well, maybe they should be controlling what the local municipalities can or cannot do in areas like this. The same thing happened with the Chicken Freedoms Act. They were trying to pass a state law saying that people should be able to have chickens. Well, and so Wham is taking the position with these things, even though they're relatively minor, that these are the decisions best made at the local level.
And why even have a city council if they're gonna
Exactly.
pass laws like that?
Exactly, and so Wham is our voice saying, you may not be thinking about this, but what you're really doing is disempowering your local municipal authorities when you.
State
And
would be
now
benefit
these things didn't pass. Okay, they didn't pass. So, but that's part of the reason why is that argument about local control is being made, and Wham is our voice, kind of reminding people that wait a minute, this is something that should be happening in these rooms. So, let's see, what else happened? So now there's a discussion about interim topics, and so Wham is proposing that we have an interim study of the abatement process, because we continue to have problems where municipalities will have a property that needs to be taken care of, that's very run down, but there's an out-of-state owner, and there's really no easy way for the cities to recover their costs when they have to basically take care of a rundown property. And so there's a dangerous situation that needs to be addressed. We want an interim study in terms of, again, the whole issue of should local governments have an opportunity to have more control over revenue sources, because if just by way of reminder, Wyoming is 50th out of the 50 states in terms of the amount of control that local governments have in raising revenue. And so we want them to study that and see if there's some ways they can give us a little more authority. We also are recommending a study group on unemployment compensation law changes, because we continue to have problems where people are terminated for willful misconduct and they're still being approved for unemployment compensation. And you've had to deal with that, Carter, every manager has. And you shake your head and say, wait a minute, this person was fired for cause. They should be eligible for unemployment compensation, but it's easy to give other people's money away, and so that's what happens sometimes. And then Wham is also proposing a study of the requirement for us to have all of our notices published in the paper, which is very expensive, and to look at more current electronic methods of announcing our actions and reducing some of those costs. And of course, the Wyoming Press Association is very much against that. So those are 4 of the topics that Wham is proposing that they study in the interim. And I think that's it for right now.
Will that be, is that in our,
I think you all got
records?
this as an
Okay.
email attachment.
Yeah, you said that.
Okay.
A couple of those bills that didn't pass, the reason for that. And that's because Democrats asked to have them passed, and they couldn't get out of committee. Well, I'm serious.
So,
And Wham isn't gonna save the Democrats. Does this light up as far as it'll go? There we go. People won't fall asleep.
Now you can see me, Dallas.
Yeah. I see you, period.
All right, Counselor on the table. You have anything to share, add, anything like that, Mike, today? No.
We've got a couple meetings this week, but I'll report after we have them.
Yes.
I did want to talk a little bit about John's memo. There's a couple things that I wanted to, I hope at least council considers it. Previously, we had an agreement from what I understand was all of the people that met with you a number of times, that it was going to be 6 p.m. On Friday and Saturday. Right now, the way this reads, it's a free-for-all on Saturday, and we're at 5 p.m. according to the signs that are down there. However, in one place, we say they can start using it at 3 p.m. But the discussion, as I recall it, but you know, it was a lot going on. As I recall it, we originally said the parking sign number. And because a lot of people thought it was at 3 p.m., but in fact, the signs do say 5 p.m. But the issue on Saturday is really difficult for the folks that have other businesses downtown. If we allow this to happen, I just think it's imposing a lot on the other, I'm guessing 100 or so businesses down there, to say that they can do this all day on Saturday and Sunday. So just for your consideration. The other thing we've got is the issue with when you get the permits. Right now, I think we're reading 10 days before, but I think we need to consider defining that a little bit different, because typically when we have something that depends on something that has to happen by a certain date, there is a deadline in terms of 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. or 3 p.m. But we are going to run into the issue when you have more than one vendor that wants to do that on a given day. And therefore, I think we need to consider at least having a lottery system where you draw straws. You get 3 guys want to have it the same day, on the same block face, you got to draw straws. And you can't say first come, first serve, because there are going to be people that, for one reason or another, are going to be down here at 0800 when the office opens. And they may be able to do that, but that's not necessarily fair. Say it has to be in by 5 p.m. at the end of a business day. No different than we handle any other bid that we take from other people for any service we provide. So I think it's just reasonable for us to consider that, okay, we picked the time, it has to be in by 3 o'clock so that they can even start rolling with whatever the time, but also have some way to say, no, this is, you draw a short straw. So that's all I have on it, but those are just things that I hope we would consider before we get to the second reading.
Thanks, Bob. Sean?
I know a whole lot. I'm gonna miss most of June, just so you know, for Army training.
Great.
I'll get you the dates on that. That's all I got.
Is that a legitimate excuse?
Being called to serve my state.
Can we write you an excuse?
I wish. I really don't wanna go. I have to.
Jesse, got anything?
Wyoming guy through and through, serving your city, county, and state.
I mentioned that.
It's a check for it too.
Everything. This is well-rounded man. I do have a number of things tonight. Some questions, I guess, too, also, since we're getting closer to, you know, fiscal year 19's budget and budget meetings and things like that. Looking through fiscal year 18, I'm just curious to know more maybe about weed and pest, for example. The majority of that comes from, of course, taxes. And then we have a huge amount of intergovernmental fees within that then requires, I guess, a subsidy on that. So I'm just curious to know, you know, do we have to have all of those intergovernmental fees to meet that requirement to take care of our obligation? You don't have to answer that tonight. I'm just interested in knowing that. And I'm also interested to know what we have for full-time city employees for fiscal year 19. We have 500 for fiscal year 18. And for future years, it would be nice to know exactly what a COLA would cost us and what percentage that you would deem appropriate to give that to our city employees. Should you know, we authorize that and that to be the recommendation out of your office. And then, you know, if that does happen, I'd also would like to know the costs associated with some of the changes in healthcare, you know, some of the burden that we put back onto our city employees. So ideally, the COLA kind of makes up for that, in addition to saying thank you for your service and your hard work over these hard times. And in terms of council, it would be nice to have all council members for this discussion. Move on to the next one. I found it an interesting, especially since we're recruiting police officers right now, so it's called COPS, which is nice, so it's an acronym, and it stands for Comprehensive Officer Preparation Seminar, which is just an overview of tests, interview questions, what to expect for the oral board. So it basically prepares people that are interested in joining the force to basically set them up for success. They're going into it blind by and large part, and they don't know what to expect, so it might be an interesting thing. Another police jurisdiction or whatever you call it does it. It's just a 2-hour seminar. It's nothing big, and they also have the opportunity to do the physical requirements, and then they have an idea on where they need to improve. So when they actually go through the formal application process, and it might help even weed out some of the other applicants. So you mentioned over 100 applicants. You know, how much time is going to be wasted on maybe people that aren't qualified, or they're going to realize maybe it's not the best fit for them. I'm curious to know, are we using the NLC grant access? Do you know?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, probably not as much as we could be.
Okay.
It's varied over the years, but I'm sure there's more we could be doing with it.
They sometimes require a fee to have multiple users, so I guess my question, if we're not using it, could I have access to that? Or if not, could I have my own login credentials to access that, to see perhaps what grants maybe Ward 1 might be eligible for? You know, something as simple as trimming trees on our parkways and replanting things in other improvement areas that we might be eligible for. So I'd like to use it in that regard, and maybe even nonprofit organizations that we subsidize. And as you mentioned, we're moving towards 1%, so it'd be great to get grants for these areas that they're eligible for on a state and federal level, so we don't have to maybe subsidize them through our 1% or general fund. And I brought it up last year. NLC offers free videos to kind of showcase your city, and it's used as a tourism thing, something we could put on our website. And they actually offer 2 a year, so you could actually have a summer and a winter one, which would be great for the city of Casper, especially the change in, you know, you can do it all really here in our county. And I'd like to pursue that, or ask, I guess, the mayor to pursue that, but I'm happy to take it on to get that ball rolling.
5 thumbs for support for stuff to be saying, just throwing that out there.
And it's all free, so just so everybody knows, the grant access is free. Additional user, that there's a cost, but the video to showcase the city of Casper is completely free. The winter one is free.
Is that from the NN? Is that from the?
That's just from us being a member of the National League of Cities.
The
program.
NN, okay.
So I don't know if I can get guidance to kind of go on my own to hopefully get a video going of the city of Casper to showcase. Hopefully it would be done after, I guess, David Street Station is complete, but it would be great to get that video.
Is that something that we get support from council? Maybe move forward with that.
Sure. And perhaps Visit Casper could use the video too.
Looks like you got support.
Great, thank you. Okay, going back to my other item. I would like to propose that we would defund the revolving land fund that was created in 2008. It was used to buy and sell property to try to get it redeveloped, and I think, in my opinion anyway, that we're not maybe using that fund appropriately. There's been a large, or at least some members on council have said we should be in the real estate business, for example, and that fund certainly allows that to take place when we bought the Plains Furniture Building area and other property, and then we're looking for perhaps a Hall of Justice Center in Fire Station 1, and then we got rid of what's now the state's land in front of the office and Rocca's. So, you know, I don't believe that we're really utilizing it the way we ought to for specific purposes, such as the expansion of city services, or to actually recoup money and make money off buying maybe land instead of buying over appraised value, selling it under appraised value. So that 1.4 million, I would like to give to our city manager to use at his discretion. And after going to the school board meeting, it sounds like we may need help, depending on what that funding model looks like with the Natrona County School District, to fund resource officers. But I'd like to get maybe an idea, if that's a terrible idea from a city manager, to defund the revolving land fund. But I would like to see that go towards something positive in public safety, more importantly.
You prepared to answer that, or do you want to think about it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I appreciate that. We certainly do need funds. There's no doubt. And so what I'd like to do, if I could, is take that into consideration and perhaps bring you a plan as a part of the budget process to say if indeed council is comfortable with that idea, here's what we would propose using it for, or putting it into, or whatever. If that's amenable.
I think it needs to be a council discussion.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's
I
what
mean,
was
I can
gonna-
think of a couple places right now, we need to buy a lot. I think of McKinley and about Fifth Street, where we've got these two offset streets.
Mhm.
If either one of those houses comes up for sale, we need to buy that right now. We could get rid of a whole
McKinley and
bottleneck.
It's got a jog.
Yeah, I know where
Yeah.
I'm just said that because I could just get it in my mind.
I mean, I can think of things like that we need to jump on.
So you're thinking, come back and maybe that way we can have a discussion about it.
Oh, absolutely.
You could make
Yeah.
a work session topic.
Be great, especially hearing about, you know, the lack of money maybe in offering healthcare and the shortfall there could help out. So I'd be interested to know what you can do with it, or like I said, it might be just a terrible idea, but
I'm good with that.
great, thank you.
Yep.
1% funding. You know, we're not there yet, so it might be a discussion for next year. But when we get to the 1 cent funding, you know, I'd like to challenge council, and, you know, I might not be on council, but I might show up to a public meeting just to let you guys know that we should try to remain diligent on the nonprofit organizations that we support. And if we could allocate only a certain amount of money and then have just a rigorous application process on what we assess is needed in our community, instead of working out a large sum of money, I think it would be important just to have a number and then stick to that number right there, whether it's $2 million or whatever. You know, at that point, we can say, you know, does it make sense to give $300,000 to the Wyoming Medical Center, or does it make sense to give a ton of money towards the Biathlon Club, when we could put it towards the Youth Crisis Center and other areas like that. A few business owners downtown, kind of speaking to Councilman Hopkins, the MVPP, some business owners are concerned about the weekend. But at that same time, you know, Frontier's closed on Sunday, and they don't open until 11 a.m. on Saturday. So I imagine it shouldn't be too big of a deal, but I would like to have council at least consider their concerns. I'm just being their voice of what they approached me about, their concern about the weekend, particularly breakfast and lunchtime.
From the brick and mortars.
Right. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Kenny.
I did have the opportunity to meet yesterday with the group that was a little bit concerned about the East Bell Loop, but
Yeah.
it's kind of resolved itself, so it was a quick, easy discussion. So they're pleased. I think we need to go through each of Jesse's ideas and give a thumbs up or thumbs down. Otherwise it just, I don't know, at the end of the meeting, there's a big long list of things, but it just gets lost. And I hear your frustration because you point out that you brought it up last year. So to fix that, we either go through it item by item, or that's my only idea actually, unless you guys have a different idea.
Thoughts?
Thanks. So I guess just to start on that, maybe the thumbs that I would need would maybe be the grant access for NLC to try to acquire grants for the city of Casper, and like I said, perhaps nonprofit organizations. So that's time that I would be spending on my own weekends, nights, homework assignments for myself.
We
Is that
already
legal?
did that, didn't we?
Didn't we say yes to that already?
Well,
No.
that was for the video.
Oh.
That was for the
Oh, I'm
video. This
sorry.
is for the
I'm sorry.
access to the grant, being able to get that. If there's like a login or if there's something, a password to that Jesse can have that opportunity to look at it and see if there are grants
Willing,
available.
if you're willing.
Yeah.
If he wants to look at it,
Great.
it's on you.
Thanks, yeah.
If you found one, you'd bring it back, present it,
Yeah.
write it, bring it back for everybody to review.
Exactly, so if we are eligible, hey, this is what we're eligible for, this is what we can do, let's see if we can make it happen.
And I think we gave the thumbs up for the video, right?
Yep.
Is
And
there
we're bringing
anything-
the other item to a work session, which is fantastic. You know, we're probably not going to tackle the 1 cent here, and it's probably not appropriate to do so, but keep that in the back of your minds. And, you know, I would like to see perhaps a public-private partnership for sidewalks. It would be interesting to know what we could do with 1 cent to help our citizens. There's so many properties that are so old that have changed hands over the course of 40 years. They probably have the same sidewalk. They sold the property 10 times, and the sidewalk's been the same over that period. So it'd be great to improve our neighborhoods, our sidewalks. We're talking about walkability and things like that. Whether we cover the construction cost and they pay for the concrete, or we pay for the concrete, they pay for a general contractor, or if they feel comfortable in getting it to meet code standards, great. But it'd be great to use taxpayers' dollars to improve our city sidewalks. And I actually did want to thank you. I did want to bring an idea. Other municipalities, they use some of the enterprise funds to subsidize streets, for instance. I'm not sure if we could do that with any of our enterprise, or if you've ever done that in some of the towns that you're familiar with. You know, would that be an option with our Valefield enterprise fund to help reduce that general fund burden?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, there are some cities that do that. I guess I would feel probably better about a particular defined use in that regard, as to what that would look like and how that would appear. The thing that I've always kind of struggled with is the idea of using enterprise rates and so forth as a means of just outwardly funding general fund kinds of operations. And so I've been leery of adopting that wholesale. But I certainly have found over the years applications that really make a lot of sense. And street sweeping is a good example. I think that has a lot of applicability in sanitation, and fortunately y'all were supportive of migrating that operation in sanitation and that kind of thing. So that would be an example where I've seen it work well. Others I'd probably want to learn more.
Okay.
And then your public-private partnership for sidewalks, we've done that through like an LED local assessment district. So the last project was down in the Fort Casper neighborhood, where we did the whole street reconstruction and slope grading. So we partnered with the neighborhood to redo their
Over a period of 2 or 3
sidewalks.
years.
Yeah, it took
It's
a
3
while.
phases.
Yeah, it took a while.
And the first 2 phases are done. The third phase, basically, that was a 1 cent priority 2 project, I believe. But we had to put that on hold because the 1 cent monies weren't coming in.
So that tool's there.
But you're right, there are some areas, like the Westridge area really badly needs it. The LEDs are a challenge because obviously you have a certain number of people who don't want to pay 1 penny, but everybody has to pay if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, but you can't really keep the streets fixed if the sidewalks and curbs aren't in good repair because you've got no way to contain the asphalt. So, but
Seems like from a policy standpoint, when we have actually rebuilt a street, though, we have tended to rebuild the sidewalks, because you've got to do all the infrastructure at once. It doesn't make economic sense to patch it here and patch it there.
Oh, yeah.
Matter of fact, we're strongly criticized for that once in a while. We do a street and somebody needs to put in a new water line.
It's problematic since, you know, since the property owner is responsible for the sidewalks. And that's, most people aren't even aware of that.
Yeah. We are if you paid for rebuilding several.
Dallas.
I'm only gonna be slightly longer than Jesse was. I think there's a couple mistakes in Mr. Henley's ordinance. One is, we changed, and I would ask that he go and look at the video of this. Probably, if everybody did that, probably it'd be helpful as to what we did. But we changed, there's no 10-day, it's D2A3. There's 10 days in advance of the requested parking date. We changed that to you can get it on the day you want it, basically. That's it's a weekend and we're not open, so you have to do it the day before. So we took that 10 days totally out of it. We did do the 3 p.m. until 3 a.m. And Chris Walsh explained that in terms of what he thought.
It's 2 hours parking, so if you park at 3 o'clock, you basically can park till 3 a.m. because you've got your 2 hours, plus the requirement just is lifted at 5, that was the thinking. So it's really a 3 p.m. free parking.
Yeah, so I think that that's correct. I'm gonna go back and review the video myself, because there's a couple other things that I'm not quite sure about. This is why I wanted to table it until we got everything done and we could all read it, because this is what you all passed. But it's not correct in this document, so I want a correct document based upon what was passed. And then maybe we need some sort of a meeting to then discuss what Bob is suggesting in terms of these changes, because I think we've hashed all that out. Quite frankly, I don't wanna hash it out again. We did, it happened the other night. If there's something new that anybody wants to do or change that wasn't discussed, I don't mind discussing that. So Jesse and I last night went to the school board meeting. And one thing that always impresses me is this leisure board. And so I'm thinking, do we need to have a school safety advisory board that we appoint? I can't tell you how serious this problem is in my mind at least. And last night, when we went to the meeting, and Jesse can give you his viewpoints of this, but they have their big table there where they have their work sessions. And they had the police chief, and you had 5 officers there, I think, or 4, didn't you? There were 3 of you, yeah, there were 5 of you total. They had the sheriff and his 2 main guys, Mark Sellers and who's the great big guy?
Steve Schultz.
Well, this guy's bigger than Steve Schultz. He's the
Sheriff's
sheriff.
office?
Yeah. Man, that guy, I know him, I can't think of his name. And then the DA was there, and numerous other people, and it was obvious they're looking for answers of how to handle the situation, because Dabney came up, it was discussed about the students that go in the back of Kelly Walsh in the single point of entry and going through the back. The chief could explain all that as to what they're seeing the problems are right now. And then it came up, one of the trustees asked about having school teachers with guns. And again, Daphne says he's vehemently, can't ever pronounce that word, against it. Which, when people ask me, and I said to the chief, I'm for it if the teacher is also a peace officer and knows how to handle a weapon. Otherwise, I don't want to see him with weapons in there. It's just too dangerous. And then the civil liability on top of it, and then the teacher getting shot themselves and all of that. So, but anyway, they discussed all of that, and they're searching for what has to be done. And I've been researching the issue quite thoroughly, and I see different areas that have to be addressed. But if we had an advisory board of people who worked on this year-round, these are our children, and they're scared. Some of them are scared, and they don't think, in some ways, some of them just are worried that we're not taking care of our children. The children are thinking that. And the only thing I can ever go back to is when my parents got divorced when I was 5 years old. My mother remarried, and we moved to a little town called Ely, Nevada. And this was in the early 50s. Well, what happened was we all got told that when this really dark cloud comes over, we all have to get under our desks. Because what we didn't know is they were blowing up atomic bombs 235 miles from Ely, Nevada. And we were all scared. It scared us. Because they did drills where you have to get under your table. Because we thought, well, what are we going to do? Get all blown up? Or what's this going to do? And my uncle came to town with a Geiger counter, went out in our backyard, and the Geiger counter kept going off. We all thought, is this uranium? These kids are scared, and we need to be showing them we're doing something to make it safe. So I would like this council to think about a school safety advisory board, because I think that we could get so many good ideas as to what should be done. One of the things one school is doing, because some of these kids that go off shooting people are loners and feel hated, and the other students have nothing to do with them, they now have a deal called Take a Student to Lunch. And so a bunch of the cool kids get together and they go find some little kid that's sitting over here in the corner, take him to lunch and bring him into the fold. Now this is going to start. You know, it gets back to the golden rule. And where do we put that in schools? We go where everybody can treat other people like they themselves would like to be treated. But this is a serious problem. Chief of Police sat there last night telling them what a serious problem this is. And talking about now what happens if somebody figures out how to wear a suicide vest into a school, or shoots them from the outside on some knoll, which we have plenty of. It's going to take this whole town, this whole state, the whole country to defeat this problem. And we just have to keep after it. So I'm not asking either for thumbs up or thumbs down. I'd like you to think about it. But while we're thinking about it, somebody else is planning something. Now, it became crystal clear to me how badly we need to hire more officers. And like last night, I'm thinking, well, what if they parked, because they were talking about parking, just a police car sitting there, of how that deters crime. Just having the police car sitting there. Now we have police cars that are sitting at home parked on streets. I don't know what the chief would say about what if the guys that were off duty parked their cars around some of these schools and then picked them up after all the kids were gone. I don't know. I don't know if that will work or whatever, or the logistics of that. I asked the sheriff about, do you have any extra cars? He said, we don't have the situation you guys have. We don't have a car for every officer, so we can't do that. And everybody's looking in there, and of course, there's 6 guys sitting at that table that are all armed. And they're the ones who should be armed. And the truth is, the enemy here is within. The enemy here is within, because the people who are shooting up the schools are usually somebody that went to that school. Now, this is Charlie's realm now. And they didn't address that. They were trying to address that last night, Charlie. but they needed somebody like you there to be on that, to have been at that discussion. And that was a big deal conversation. Did you think so?
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody in there is scared and they're worried about these children. And we didn't stay, I left, I don't know if you stayed, but they filled the room up. Because their next session is their regular meeting where then you get, after the Pledge of Allegiance, people can get up and state what they have to state. And I think it was powerful because had 2 TV cameras in there, they had somebody from the paper in there. This is talking about our children's safety, period. And I can't think of one issue that we've talked about tonight that supersedes our city's children's safety in the school. I can't think of one. I want to figure out how we can get the money, Mr. Manager, to hire at least 10 more officers. Because when Dabney said it, and he said it, and then he looks at me, we have 2 these service officers for 12,000 students. That hit me in the face like one of those water cannons did. We're not taking care of the children with 2 officers to service 12,000 children in this town. And I go back and I look at the statutes that govern us, and our duty is to protect our citizens first. So all I'm saying is let's get after the program. And I just want you all to think about it, because I know once you start thinking about this, it will get in there and you're going to start saying, you know, we just can't be sitting around here doing nothing. Because I was asked why one of the trustees says, well, you passed the resolution, but you didn't give it any money. I said, well, if we could print money, this council would have given money. But somehow, we have a manager, we have a new police chief, we have the police department. We're supposed to be doing this. We're not the school board who doesn't have a police department. They're looking at us, and they're looking at this chief and those men who were sitting there, including the sheriff, who didn't say much. He was listening, but he understands the problem. He's a very smart guy. And so are his deputies. I know them well. And they don't want to see any of this stuff happening. And I'm telling you, I'm not going to put this down, because I see these grandchildren. I see your grandson, Bob. I've met your grandson. And think of losing a child. I lost a granddaughter last year who didn't come home. This is tough duty here, but we're in charge, and it says we regulate the police department. That's our statutory duty. And Chief McFeeters told them all last night. He says, I've got very clear message from the council of what I need to be doing. I think I'm quoting you right, aren't I?
Of course not.
Do you have anything you want to add to this from your viewpoint?
I appreciate the chief being there and of course representing the police department, and hopefully with council support, we just gave the city manager $1.4 million to play around with, to go to those resource officers to pay for that for multiple years depending on what that agreement is with Natrona County School Board. So that's a possibility right there, Dallas. And you know, the district attorney had a lot of good comments and concerns about arming people. And you know, if you have one point of entry in my mind, you know, having somebody armed at the door certainly helps drive that, you know, possibility of massive harm to our students down.
Well, if no guns can get into the school, nobody gets shot. That's the issue right there. Now, how do you keep those guns out of there when the only guns are with people that have that badge on over there? We're going to do something once we focus on that issue Because everybody on this council's from, has lived in Wyoming or from Wyoming or been in Wyoming and understands firearms and self-protection and all this. And we can, in this little town, set a standard for the rest of the United States. This is an area where we're experts. And we can't sit around and not protect our children. Thank you, Mr.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. I think I just want to hear from the content experts and the people who've studied what's worked and what hasn't, rather than have us try to, essentially as amateurs, try to figure out what the best solutions might be. So, my issues are very different. I don't want to lose track of Mr. Clark's presentation about the West Side Post Office, which may seem trivial compared to what we just heard, but it is still an issue, and I would like for us to, especially as a Ward 2 representative, discuss that as to whether we would have a role in trying to address that problem. And I'm certainly more than willing to talk about the revolving land fund. Rocco's and Arc 321 would still be an abandoned fruit warehouse if it wasn't for the revolving land fund. And so it is controversial, I understand, but it's not a no-brainer to stop it. It comes with consequences. And we can debate the plane's purchase until the cows come home, but I still think it was the right decision. So, and I think that's it for me. Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
There is one thing, and not understanding what the round table thing is, but I want to warn you guys, and Carter, I want to warn you, looking at the, I think on the next agenda, there's $207,000 for an engineering contract to pay somebody to design a water and sewer project. Something that you guys are going to hear me beat on about this is I don't know why we have a city engineer. And I've looked at this year after year after year after year, and hundreds of thousands of dollars that the city pays to engineering firms to design things. For $200,000, I would think we could go out and hire a very competent professional engineer to be on staff to do this stuff. And I see this year after year that the city is paying these really high fees to these guys to design things. Now, you gotta have competent engineers to design this stuff, I know that. But you're gonna hear me bring that up, because you could hire a really good engineer for that price, and they'd be on your staff, and they could do some other stuff for you too. And, and I just wanna warn you that, I'm gonna be beating on that drum from time to time, because I don't see why we have to keep contracting with people to do things. Why do we have a city engineer if every time we have an engineering project, we gotta go contract with someone? But I'll get off that soapbox for now.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so basically, yeah, Mike, that's the roundtable is issues that you may have, or maybe you've talked to constituents, and that's really what the roundtable is about.
Yeah, okay, great, yeah.
So any issues that you want to bring up is,
No, not really.
is pertinent. So.
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
Mr. Mayor, I heard Councilman Laird suggest a discussion about the mobile vendor ordinance, and of course you, as we all talked about, you have a draft here in front of you. What I thought I heard being suggested was potentially tabling the second reading and inserting, in my estimation, a work session in between there that would allow for the conversation to be had about some of the nuances of what it is that you're, potentially considering on second reading Tuesday night. So if there is direction different than what I have assumed for Tuesday night, which would be a second reading, a full-throated second reading coming up on the 17th, we would need to know that tonight.
I think we're still moving forward. Am I correct with the second reading?
This isn't accurate. This is not accurate based on what we did. I wish Chris Walsh was here, because he, I thought, stated that more succinctly. And there's a couple things that are not accurate. I don't wanna change personally anything until we get what we passed, or what you all passed. Keneen and I voted against it, but my mind is we do need an ordinance, and I wanna get the parameters of what everybody agreed on down here, correctly. And I'm not blaming anybody for anything. That whole melee we had in there is not the way I wanna do business, because this is what happens when you're doing things on the fly. I just don't think it's a good idea.
How would you thumbs for a work session?
There you go.
I would ask that we move it for discussion. That's something that I found out second and third reading, you have to ask to talk about it, right? It's just the motion to approve or deny. You don't have a discussion period for second.
So you're making a move to have it as a discussion.
I'm requesting from the city manager's office that be pulled for discussion.
I may be hearing a couple things here, so I want to be real clear about what we're talking about.
Right, we've got a couple things going on the table right now.
Okay,
Well,
so
you can't table something here in this meeting. It's already going to be on a,
Right.
has to, the second reading has to go to the next regular council meeting, right?
It still has to go. I mean, we have to have it go
So there's
through to
nothing
the
that
next.
can do here, so what we would have to do is
Am
pull
I
it
correct in
and
that?
then have a motion on the floor to postpone to a work session or
Yeah.
another day.
Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad I brought this up, because it sounds like there's a mixture of ideas with regard to what we can potentially do here. We do have a second reading scheduled, and I would agree that putting a tabling motion together in here would be inappropriate. However, you do have the opportunity to set the agenda for whatever meeting you want to have. And so, and I would also add, just to kind of capture a number of questions that I think I'm hearing, you can have a discussion portion in a second and a third reading. Robert's Rules allows for discussion at every part of a reading process. What would be different would be a public hearing scheduled for all three readings, which we do not anticipate doing for the second and third reading. So, like I said, I know it's a number of things I'm saying here, but I'm trying to respond to what I think may be a number of questions. The other thing that I would suggest is, if a work session is not something of interest, we can talk about the elements of the ordinance that you have in front of you right now to address what some may perceive as being incorrect or not correctly represented in the ordinance. So we got a number of options.
First public hearing was, as you presented it, and it was substantially changed, I thought.
From that night to tonight?
Yes.
Yes,
And
correct.
so once the substantial changes get reflected, and now it's confusing to me even, but I know that we didn't maintain that 10-day thing. We got off of that. And that we did talk about the 3 to 3, and that was confusing to me as well. And that we were going to let anywhere else other than that stretch of Second Street, we were gonna let these people park where they wanted and do what they wanted. They just get a permit, is the way I understood it. Yeah, and so to me, when that, we substantially remodeled the ordinance. Now, whether we should then have another public hearing on it, because it wasn't the same one we had the public hearing on to begin with. I don't know whether that's fair to the public or not, but I just want to make sure that the ordinance, when we sit down to vote next time, is the proper one that was amended word for word the way we suggested. And maybe Mr. Henley's right, but I'm pretty sure that a couple things were not changed.
You're right about the 10 days.
And so I don't wanna be going in there with a ordinance on a second reading that isn't proper sitting in front of me now. It's the same argument I said before. I want the proper ordinance in front of me, and when I go in there and push my button this next time, I don't wanna be fiddling around with something.
Mr. Mayor, just a suggestion. Chris essentially made the amendment to the original ordinance we had. And would it be appropriate for Chris to get together with John and see how that fits together? Because Chris probably hadn't had a chance, well, he hadn't had a chance to see this.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Councilman, I don't think that's a bad idea. The problem is you are authorizing a member of your group to effectively amend the ordinance if he doesn't agree.
Well, yeah, that's true.
That
You're right.
is
You're right.
reflective,
Never
you know what I
mind.
mean?
Yeah.
And so, what I would suggest is if there is a majority in this room that feels like this ordinance is not reflective, we really need to know what that is so that we can make sure that the amended ordinance for second reading comports with what the direction of the council was. And I can tell you that looking at the video is something we do and can do if we need to re-review it. So you just tell us what you'd
So
like
what's
us
the
to do.
possibility of you
can,
guys being able to go back, review the video, make the corrections, and then let us send it back to us via email to do that? Is that something that's possible?
Oh, that's easy. Yeah, you bet.
Instead of hashing it out right now,
Sounds good to me.
and then just video and just say we made the following corrections, please verify. That could even give us time if we wanted to go and watch the video too, so we're on top of that, be able to. Is that okay?
Sure, it absolutely.
I'm game for that.
Okay,
Okay. We can do that. You bet.
great, thank you.
If I'm hearing your direction and what council is agreeing to, then I'm not hearing in concert with that an inserted work session between now and the second reading,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Could we, just to make it easier to follow, could we use cap strike format
The,
for any modifications to this after you look at the video?
sure, you bet.
That just makes it,
Like the strike
easier for me
through
to
kind of
follow.
thing, yeah.
yeah.
We sure can.
And I
And-
don't remember discussing the penalty either. I don't like that penalty. I wouldn't vote for it just over the penalty.
Well,
It's too harsh.
It's quite possible you didn't discuss it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't in the first.
No, I agree with that.
Okay,
But it
okay.
was not addressed, nobody talked about it, because it wasn't in the form of the ordinance that we're now getting to. Because I would wanna make another motion or two to amend a couple things that are already in there
Sure.
that we didn't discuss, that I wasn't aware of the other night. So if you, but I like your suggestion of, we set the agenda, let's set this agenda with this deal a little further down the road. That's what I would say. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, so we have time to get this redone, everybody to look at it, and then go in and, we spent so much time on this, we better get it right, that's all I'm saying.
Is there any, Dallas wants to move it from this Tuesday, obviously, to move it down. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so give them a chance to watch the video, give them a chance to get this, give them a chance to get it out to us, let Walt see us, and then we can bring it back. They're not,
But
nobody's going
do we
anywhere.
have to have it next week for our second reading?
I don't think we do. It's not like we're announcing a public hearing, which we do have to have some period of time in between. So we don't have that mandate on top of us. And so if you wanted to,
Have it on the next, not this one, but in 3 weeks? That'd
what,
be great.
council can tell us when you want it.
The thing we do have is a
Today
lot of
is-
people that wanna start using it.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
This is spring.
And I was just gonna say what Councilman Hopkins just said. You know, my understanding of the procedure is that you can, on second or third reading, you can make amendments, and they can be passed by the body. And so, you know, I'm not at all troubled by the idea of having this on the agenda, not as a consent item, but as a, you know, open discussion item. And then if there are problems, you know, like Councilman Laird says, and somebody else says, well, wait a minute, this isn't the way I want it, I want to amend out this penalty section or increase it or do whatever, you know, we can do that and you know,
Yes.
and do that. So I'd say
Keep it on Tuesday's
agenda, but just be aware of that. And if it,
Would you have enough time to review the video and revise before Friday, before the packet goes out?
Oh, sure.
Then I would.
Then just do that, Debbie.
yeah.
Well, and Mike, the issue is that I agree with you on amending it the second time, but this isn't the proper amendment.
I
I
understand
want that changed before I see it again.
That's what.
Yeah, because it, you know, by all means.
It'll be in the packet.
It wouldn't be an
Needs to-
amendment, it's just a correction.
So
Correct,
in effect,
right,
we're having an
yeah.
audit, and then we have the amendment process two more times.
So it'll be corrected in the packet that we get
Yeah.
Friday,
Yeah.
There we go.
for next Tuesday's meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
one more thing. Could we get line numbers? Just like the legislature does. Put line numbers on it. Line number 2 on page 4.
So can we go around really quick, just to make clarification for staff? So we're okay with having it on the agenda on Tuesday as is. After the attorney's office looks through the video, clarifies all that. Everybody's good with that? You're good, Mike, with
Yeah,
that? You're
I'm
good?
good with that.
Good, good.
I'll live with it.
Okay.
Thank you, thank
As
you.
long as I
That was
have it
easy.
all corrected
Yeah.
by sometime this week.
Well, so that it's accurate.
Yeah,
If it's
that's
not
right.
accurate.
I don't have
saw
a,
that one thing, but.
I'm gonna go ahead and give my time. I don't have didn't have too much, so we can go ahead and move into executive session. Oh,
Really fast, if you guys have amendments, it might be helpful if we send them in to you guys so that maybe they can be pre-scripted,
Oh,
so
that'd
that
be
we're
good.
not.
that would be nice.
Very
Yes,
helpful.
please. Yep.
Thank you.
Just no emails to all council members.
I will drop them. by the
Violation
office.
of the Open Meetings Act.
No emails to all council members?
You can't have an email discussion with the entire.
You can email them, but you can't ask them for opinion. Is that?
Oh,
wouldn't that be correct?
Well,
Yeah, put your name in it.
not really, because,
Email everybody, so we're gonna have a meeting
I don't
on.
think
all
we
it
did. I
takes
think
is
I
one, all it
interrupted
takes is one
Okay.
person to respond to you, say,
I move we go
I
into
agree with
exec.
this, but I don't agree with that, you know, you're having.
Second,
Thank
in
you.
sec, in
We got
executive
it,
session.
we got it, yep.
Did you get it?
Yes.
I think we voted aye.
What's the executive session on?
Personnel.